And also, they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome, I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 3 hours I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter all over the country. Plenty coming up. As threats build and threats are redefined, how safe do you feel? And are the UK's defences up to the challenges? A former immigration minister gives us his take on the migrant crisis and the crass cross-channel diplomacy. And a good cause to make your tail wag. But first, it's time for a full roundup of all the news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. This is your news at 12 o'clock. COVID vaccines are being altered amid concerns the new variant Omicron could be resistant. Germany is the second country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. Pfizer expects to be able to produce a tailor-made jab in 100 days, while Novavax says it will have a vaccine ready to test in the next few weeks. Overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the variant was first detected. The strain has also been found in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium.
Once you detect it, it's probably too late to stop it completely from getting into the country, but delaying more people bringing in this variant to compound the current problem we have with Delta virus is something that's really important. We react quickly. We know from previous experience that dithering and delaying in doing things and just paying attention to what virus is coming from where has landed us in trouble in the past. So just being a bit more cautious and preempting a problem is quite important.
2 men have died after being struck by trees as Storm Arwen hit the UK with 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. One man was killed in County Antrim yesterday afternoon and a second died in Cumbria last night. More than 100,000 homes have experienced a power cut across the UK. Amber and yellow weather warnings remain in place and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan has said he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azim Rafiq has experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq told MPs of his experience of institutional racism at Yorkshire. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. Tributes have poured in for the American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim. He's died aged 91. He was best known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and West Side Story. Andrew Lloyd Webber says he was a musical theatre giant. And director Steven Spielberg says he was a gigantic figure in American culture. 4 teenage boys aged between 13 and 15 have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 12-year-old girl was stabbed to death. Ava White was with friends in Liverpool city centre to watch the Christmas lights switch on when she was assaulted. Merseyside police say they aren't looking for anyone else in connection with her death.
Officers were called at 8:39 p.m. to a report of an assault, and on arrival they found that Ava was already collapsed on the ground and there was a member of the public giving first aid. Paramedics attended and took Ava to Alder Hey Children's Hospital, but very sadly she died shortly afterwards despite medical intervention.
Hundreds of migrants from Central America and Haiti have formed a new caravan in southern Mexico and are walking north towards the United States border. Around 1,000 people, many carrying children, began walking from a city bordering Guatemala and preparing to join another group and keep marching north. The migrants say their patience has run out over promised humanitarian visas that would allow them to work and reside in Mexico. And Royal Mail has announced the regional winners of a competition for young people to design stamps based on heroes of the pandemic. Children aged 4 to 14 designed stamps to celebrate a range of people, including NHS workers, parents and teachers. The Prince of Wales will select the final 8 designs. You're right up to date, but now back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Bethany, thank you very much. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, the big question I'll be asking today, will we be safe in our future lives? We'll be talking about defence policy. With mixed signals from the government and not insignificant amounts of money involved, today we are asking, what are we really trying to defend and how should we do it? Plus, the UK is bracing for the arrival of a potentially more dangerous and transmissible COVID variant. But the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Parry, warns the public won't accept tough restrictions again, and the government could have to find a different policy to control the virus. So, is Professor Parry right? And could the shopping trolley you use affect how much money you spend? Well, a new study suggests that the position of the trolley handles could be a key to it all. We'll find out why from a consumer psychologist. But first, earlier this week, a little story caught my eye, which was Ben Wallace talking about tanks going back into Germany. And it sparked a much, much wider reaction in my funny little brain. So let me take you back. In March of this year, the Defence Review saw a smarter, intelligence and cyber-driven military to meet the real threats of the day and the immediate future to the UK. As was observed then, and I quote, older conventional hardware in the MOD's infantry took a hit as the military cut programmes to better afford a pivot toward high-tech acquisitions in the fields of space, cyber, unmanned vehicles and artificial intelligence, among other advanced capabilities, close quote. So, the old days of squadrons of tanks deployed in Germany to roll across the northern plains taking on a Soviet invasion are long since gone. Royal Air Force V-bombers with nuclear weapons in their bellies ready to rain hell upon the Soviet Union at 4 minutes' notice are also gone. Sleek, silent submarines with Trident nuclear missiles cruise the depths holding today's nuclear deterrent. Pilots sit in bunkers in Lincolnshire, flying drones in the Middle East, reporting on the activities of Islamist terrorists and ready to take them out at a moment's notice. And today's soldiers are just as likely to be seen giving COVID jabs or shoring up communities under threat of flooding as they are to be seen on a shooting range or scurrying across Salisbury Plain in full combat gear. But then, where I started, a couple of days ago, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace published Future Soldier, a knock-on from that spring Defence Review. He shrunk the army to its smallest since Wellington saw off Napoleon at Waterloo. But he sang the praises of the Reserve Army, which helped push the available total to about 100,000. But more significantly, he confirmed the return of tanks to Germany about a year since they were withdrawn. Soldiers were deployed to Poland to help an ally against the migrant threat stirred up by Belarus. Russia, marshalling an army on her border with Ukraine, also gave a good old-fashioned conventional wake-up call to the West. As military types will tell you, defence is a fluid thing. Assess the enemy, assess what he's up to, and act accordingly. What was the Soviet Union is now Russia, and her chums, and Russia herself, and many independent nations. So the threat's different, But Russia still fancies her chances, with Belarus as a surrogate causing that trouble over migration, or more directly, in Ukraine, threatening an armed invasion over Crimea. So it chops and changes, and so does policy and strategy. Part of NATO, which is sandwiched between Russia, more of a rogue state than anything, with territorial ambitions and an appetite for disruption, and China, a more sophisticated, much wealthier, rich and ambitious state, and the masters of cyber war. The UK is now a smaller player, but a player nevertheless. The taxpayer funds billions a year on defence, from mighty aircraft carriers with fleets of costly new aircraft to squaddies, answering the call, from fighting Ebola in Africa to giving the anti-COVID jab effort a helping hand. Now, it's said the most important function of any government is the defence of the nation and her people. So, given mixed signals from government and not insignificant amounts of money, we are asking today what our defence policy should be. What are we defending and how? Do you feel threatened? And if so, by whom? We've assembled a fine array of former top brass from across the services to discuss this, and I'll tell you what I think a little later. But I also want to hear what you think, especially if you're in the armed services or were. I'll be back with the best of those at around 2 o'clock. So get thinking, get tweeting, and get using Facebook or TikTok or any of the other functions that we use. And you can always message me at GBNews, at gbviews at gbnews.uk. So let's get the ball rolling with former NATO commander and former Ministry of Defence Director General, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, great of you to join us. In your view, and given that experience I just nodded towards, is there in your view now a clear, coherent defence strategy, or are we still chopping and changing?
Yeah, good afternoon, Alistair. I think everything you said was entirely valid. I think we do have a coherent defence policy now, given that we are a leading member of NATO, given also that we are planning to be a leading maritime nation in a world that will be dominated by global issues, and the fact that we have to confront the authoritarian states of Russia, China, wherever they affect our interests. And I think, given the fact that if you don't spend enough on defence, it isn't credible. And if you spend too much, the taxpayer starts to ask very serious questions. I think the balance is about right, to tell you the truth. We've got to recognise that we have to be congruent with the Americans. If we're going into any major conflict, we have to have the Americans there. So congruent in the mathematical sense, small triangle, big triangle. We have to be large enough to be able to command a medium scale operation or provide the framework for that. And we also have to have a little bit left for our national tasks, such as the Falklands. And to be fair, the Integrated Review, and I authored the 1998 Defence Review, actually does a really good job of balancing the future context against the resources that we've got available and the technology and talent we can get into the armed forces. So I'm a firm supporter of what's been achieved here. Because the context, I think, has been, as I said, accurately assessed. And I think the ways and means to actually deal with the threats and opportunities have also been incorporated.
Sure. Fascinating analysis there, and the coherence of it I hear and I bank. From your own service, the Royal Navy, the senior service, the carriers, Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales, huge, costly devices, and they've been very much in the news recently, not least Queen Elizabeth out in the Far East. Hand on heart, are they badges of honour or are they entirely logical defence investments?
Yeah, a bit of both, Alistair. I mean, it's a fair comment. Every major power that aspires to anything other than a local or regional level has aircraft carriers. I mean, China's building them. China aspires to have 8 super carriers. The Americans have still got them. India's building them. And a number of countries like Japan and South Korea, they're developing aviation-capable ships. If you look at the Australians, they started off with amphibious flat tops. They're now getting F-35s. and they're seeking to project carrier power. The fact of life is, in all those situations short of total war, they're multi-purpose assets in which you can put lots of capability. I've been talking this week to the Army about the fact you could put a brigade's worth of troops in them if you had to, and deploy them around the world. And certainly when I started doing conceptual work on the carriers, we always saw them as multi-purpose platforms that at one end would take lots of fighter jets, but others would be filled up with humanitarian aid. They are huge assets. In anything short of total war, they're fantastic power projectors. And every time, oddly enough, we bring in a carrier, people say, oh, crikey, they're very expensive. I remember when the Invincible class were brought in the late 70s, people said exactly the same thing. And of course, they and military activity in the 80s, 90s onwards. I would say cheap at the price, actually, to tell you the truth.
And extraordinary, I mean, in effect as well, floating HQs. They are command centres, they are intelligence monitors, and they do that job rather than simply allow aircraft to take off and land. That's crucial in coordination terms, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that our carriers are floating chunks of sovereignty. You can take them anywhere in the world. You don't actually have to ask anybody's permission, and they project both maritime and air power at sea and from the sea. And I defy any tyrant around the world not to be impressed if he was taken out to one of our carriers and shown what it can do. And I must stress, Alistair, and you'll know with your own service background with your parents, that if you combine maritime and air power together, they're pretty formidable, as we've seen in many conflicts since the Second World War. And I should say to you, the F-35 as a fifth generation fighter is thoroughly frightening all the fourth generation fighters around at the moment.
Which leads me neatly to my final question. You talked a moment ago about having been chatting to friends and colleagues in the Army, and you're kind enough to refer back to my papa having served in the Royal Air Force. Give me your take, Chris. We all admitted you're a Navy man to your core, but objectively, what state are the three services in, and do we still need three?
Oh, yes, most definitely. And one thing that I've been convinced about, and actually I'm joint as well, Alistair. I've done 5 joint jobs, so I'm as fond of the Army and the Air Force as I am as the Navy. The fact of life, the Navy's in really good shape. It has a coherent strategy. It's been thinking about what it needs to be for the future. So in all its arms, particularly the submarine service, the Royal Marines, Fleet Air Arm, Surface Fleet, and the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. They've got a coherent plan for delivering against the Prime Minister's desire to be the leading maritime nation in Europe and to have a significant impact around the world, particularly in the globalized world that is typified by the sea. I always say the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. You can't go anywhere in the world unless you go across or through the sea. Now, in future, I think the Navy will lead the idea that British Armed Forces will be high impact but low footprint, will be very agile. The Air Force, of course, typify that in deploying some of their fighting power, both the unmanned and the manned vehicles. But for the Army, it's going to be a major transformation. Let me tell you, technologically, within the next 10 years, everything and everyone's going to be detectable on the surface of this planet. And for major military powers like Russia, China, United States, ourselves and France, that's going to be a major sort of tactical opportunity, and we'll have the weapons and systems to deal with that. But what that also means is if you're static and you have big formations on the ground, you're really going to be vulnerable to a whole range of ballistic, hypersonic missiles, and also unmanned drones and loitering munitions. So the Army is going to have to get much more agile. It's going to have to be able to be less visible on the ground. So these big mass formations are going to be very vulnerable, and they're going to have to think about how they can be high impact, low footprint, very agile. And that, I think, is going to be the major transformation. The Navy and the Air Force technically are there. They tend to operate that way anyway, but I think the Army is going to have to think about how it does. And to be fair, talking this week, the Army are thinking about that. They are transforming. But they have to get beyond Afghanistan and Iraq and start thinking about the consequences, deterring opponents like China and Russia, in combination with our allies and, of course, independently where we have to.
Chris, fascinating analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and great to talk to you again. Thank you. That's Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former NATO commander, former Minister of Defence, Director General, as he said, with a foot in all three camps, albeit wearing the crisp uniform of the Royal Navy. Yes, we have a coherent defence policy. We are thinking smarter. We are more alert to Russia and China as real threats. Those aircraft are value for money, floating chunks of sovereignty. But remember, the cyber element is crucial because everyone, Chris said, and everything will be detectable on this planet. And it's jolly good that we in the United Kingdom know what everybody else is getting up to. So that's a good start. I hope you agree to our defence analysis. Keep those messages coming in. Do you agree with Chris? Do you disagree with him? Do you think you got value for money with those aircraft carriers? Do you really understand what they're doing? We'll be continuing this conversation about our defence policy and, as I say, asking what you think we're defending and how well we're doing it throughout the show today. And around 2 o'clock, you'll hear my thoughts on the issue, and I really do want to hear what you think. So email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or get in touch on Twitter. We are also on Instagram and we are on Facebook. You're watching.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking very windy and bitterly cold, with Storm Arwen still making its presence felt. Let's take a look at the details. Skies should be brighter across southwest England, but gale-force northerly wind will continue to drive in further showers, especially across Cornwall. Feeling bitterly cold too there. Cloudier skies for London and the southeast, with further outbreaks of rain and sleet possible. Again, it will be windy with highs of just 6 degrees Celsius. Much of Wales will see sunshine, though there will be some coastal showers. Still very windy for many. Pennine areas of northwest England could remain quite cloudy, but further west there'll be some sunshine. Again, it's still windy, though winds will gradually be easing down and feeling bitterly cold for all. Plenty of showers will continue to feed in across northeast England, bringing in a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Strong northerly winds will enhance the bitterly cold feel, with highs not much above freezing. It will at least be a fairly pleasant day across central Scotland, with plenty of sunshine to close out the afternoon. Again, it will be very cold there as well. Finally, to Northern Ireland, where the strong northerly winds will continue to blow in a few showers, some of which could be wintry. Highs in Belfast around 5 Celsius. Winds will continue to slowly ease for most areas, with temperatures then falling sharply under clear skies.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Nana Aquia, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We'll learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints, over a drink, we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Omicron, that is the name of the new strain of COVID-19, which experts are calling the worst one we've seen so far. The World Health Organization's labelled it a variant of concern. The WHO has classified the new strain as highly transmissible and suggested it could pose greater risks than the Delta variant. There are fears, therefore, that it could mean the return of tougher restrictions. However, in a striking development, the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, has warned that the public won't comply with restrictions again. So, is he right? I'm delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine and this programme to discuss it, Professor of Organisational Psychology at the University of Manchester, Sir Cary Cooper. Great to see you, Professor. Let me start. Oh, we've lost that signal to him. No, I'm here now. Are we there? There we are.
We're there. Hello, Alistair. How are you?
I'm extremely well. And how are you?
Good.
We're in good shape. That's excellent.
Thank you very much.
First of all, what is your sense, not so much the Whitty point, I'll come to that in just a moment, but your sense talking to fellow senior academics in this field of this new variant? Are the government overreacting because they've got stuff wrong in the past, or are they reacting quickly and intelligently because it is a real danger, as the WHO says? What's your take?
Okay, my take is that remember the Delta virus, and remember that it originated from India, or we think it originated from India. And do remember then, we didn't stop planes coming in from India for 3 to 4 weeks. We let in 20,000 people from India with the Delta virus, and then it took off. So I think they've done the right thing to close down, because we learned from the past, and government learned from the past, that you have to take pretty responsive action. Remember, what causes people stress and worry are two factors. One is uncertainty, and one is lack of control over that uncertainty. Well, we have a lot of uncertainty about this new strain, right? We don't actually know for sure. We know it may be more infectious. And do remember, South Africa they only have 23% of their adult population immunized. So I'm not surprised that it would go pretty fast anyway within South Africa, because we don't have the vaccines there. The thing that we have to do, in my view, to minimize the uncertainty, take the booster. Everybody take the vaccine, because to some extent, no matter what this variant will be, I think we'll be protected to some extent as long as we get vaccinated, particularly the booster. Puts the effectiveness rate up to something like 95%. So the first thing to minimize the uncertainty is take the vaccine, and absolutely take the booster. The second thing is the government, in terms of control, the government has to take controls, and it already has with stopping the aircraft from coming in from the 6 countries affected. I think that's really important first step. The next step, I think ultimately, given the way, a lot of people who are going to be asymptomatic will come into the country who won't test for the virus but may have it. Therefore, I think the second stage is, if it starts to come into this country and we start to see the cases, I think really, Alistair, I'm not for lockdowns, but I think we have to think of a plan B. I really do. At that point in time, as soon as they hit us, and it's going to come at some point in time, I think the important thing is to keep it away from us as long as we can, and protecting ourselves by taking the vaccine. We've closed the airways to the country from those affected countries. And now what is really important, once it gets here, and it might get here, we don't know, but I suspect it will, given the nature of what we've seen in the past 2 years. I think we might have to do a plan B. But again, quickly, we didn't introduce restrictions of one sort or another. And by that, I mean, I just came up from London back to Manchester. I was on a train, and I would have thought there was maybe 5% of people wearing a mask on the train. I don't think that's smart, because we still have between 40 and 50,000 cases every day. We have a plane full of people dying every day, up to 130, 150. So, hey, listen, we have to take control. The government's taking control by stopping the aircraft. The government, I think, needs a plan B on this. I think it really is important to have a plan B the minute it hits our shores. That gives us a sense of control.
Let me come in at that point precisely, because you absolutely rightly said we need clarity and we need firm decisions. That's the kind of stuff that the government got wrong in the past. So write 2 pages in the Times newspaper, and it's in other ones as well, where the chief medical officer himself, Professor Chris Whitty, says, and I quote, "The public will not comply with any more restrictions. They've had enough."
I don't think that's the case. I think they have had enough. We've all had enough. There's no question about that. But I think if the scientists tell us this is a pretty virulent strain, right, and that it's potentially more dangerous, I think you'll find the public will comply. They're not complying at the moment, even though we have lots of cases. We still have lots of deaths. Right. OK, it's not as many deaths as we had during the second spike, but it is pretty fun. I mean, it's a plane load of people every day.
Yeah.
So I think, in my view, the public will, but we have to get pretty swift action on that.
Sure.
But the action that's likely to take is massive.
It's a crucial point for your area of expertise. I think the public are entitled to be intensely cynical when the health secretary himself says shutting down all of those flights coming in from southern Africa, and I heard your analysis there and the Indian comparison, completely understand that. I'm on side, but I'm only one person in a population of 60-odd million. But Sajid Javid also said, we don't know yet that it is worse than Delta. It might be, it might not be. The tests are being done. But in the meantime, this is going to happen.
Absolutely.
And then his principal advisor, the chief medical officer, says, we're not going to do it anyway. I mean, that is just so crass as messaging.
No, it's bad messaging. I think the British public will, Alistair. If we think it's serious, the scientists need to look at it the next 2 to 3 weeks. When they do, I think they'll discover how infectious it is, or whether the most important thing is, does it bypass the vaccine? If it bypasses the vaccine, that's a real worry. And believe me, the British public will come to the fore. My own view is they will come to the fore, and they need to come to the fore if that's the case. But I think the important thing is, I've heard scientists saying that, yes, people involved directly in this issue, that if we take the booster, it will have some protection. Remember, to the Delta, it's 95% effective. And I suspect it'll maybe only 60%. We don't know. We have to look at the science. But if it's 60% effective with this new variant, fine. Then we're still reasonably well protected.
Sure.
Taking the vaccine and the booster is fundamental. Quick action by government, no fooling around, no quick action in the past. They got to do it now. The public will back them. You're absolutely right, Alistair. Clear messaging. We need the clear messaging.
Final question. Do you have any sympathy, agree or disagree with the point, but do you have any sympathy with those who have a heartfelt belief that this has now become more an infringement of their civil liberties than the struggle against a virus?
No, I have no sympathy with that. We're a community now. This virus does not recognize individual freedom. It does not recognize it. It is indiscriminate. We have to, as a community, come together. Really, I don't want to demonize anybody who's wants individual freedom and doesn't want to take the vaccine. I don't want to demonize them, but come on, this is a community. These are grandparents. These are kids. These are your parents. These are people who are vulnerable. Please, as a community, let's come together. We did during the Second World War. We can do that with this. This is another war. This is a virus war.
Carrie Cooper, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Sir Carrie Cooper, the Professor of Psychology and Health at the University of Manchester. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including a former immigration minister giving his take on the migrant crisis and the collapsing cross-channel diplomacy. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest headlines. Here again is Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. These are your latest headlines. COVID vaccines are being altered amid concerns the new variant Omicron could be resistant. Germany is the second country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. Overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the variant was first detected. There are also cases in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium. 2 men have died after being struck by trees as Storm Arwen brought 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. One man was killed in County Antrim yesterday afternoon, while a second died in Cumbria last night. Amber and yellow weather warnings remain in place across the country, and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan has said he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azeem Rafiq has experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq described his treatment at Yorkshire as inhuman and racist. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. And tributes have been pouring in for the American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim, who's died aged 91. Known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and West Side Story, he was described by Sir Tim Rice as a master musical man and by Andrew Lloyd Webber as a musical theatre giant. You're right up to date. I'll be back more in half an hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. The issue of migrants has been very much on the agenda this week after at least 27 people drowned in the English Channel near Calais when their inflatable boat sank. The International Organization for Migration, said it was the biggest single loss of life in the Channel since it began collecting data back in 2014. But just a day later, yet more people made the dangerous journey across the English Channel. So an intractable problem, not perhaps helped by some of the most contemptuous diplomacy between France and the United Kingdom that I can remember in 40 years. So, what can we do to prevent another tragedy, and how can we sort our diplomacy out? I'm delighted to be joined now by Lord Timothy Kirkhope, a former immigration minister. Timothy, great to see you, and thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this afternoon. I'm going to almost cut to the conclusion, as it were, and say to you, has this now become an intractable problem of policy?
I think there's a long-term aspect to this, Alistair, where we are inevitably going to see more and more people coming from world trouble spots, trying to get a better life, trying to move away from where they have been discriminated against, and moving inevitably towards Europe and of course to the United Kingdom as well. I think it's a long-term issue which has to be tackled in a sensible and grown-up way. This is a short-term situation at the moment, but I think we're going to have to look at this in a much broader way.
And do you also sense, as I do, that the current body of law and definitions, whether it's the definition of an asylum seeker or the body of law about human rights, we've got to be brave, put our hands upon our hearts and rethink those matters as well?
Well, I think to some extent, but I've always maintained very strongly the difference between an applicant for on an immigration basis under our immigration rules and someone who seeks refugee status under the 1951 United Nations Convention, which requires certain basic things to be applicable to that person before they can be granted asylum. I think the waters have become very muddied over the last few years. When I was immigration minister back in the 90s, I was determined to make sure there was that separation, and determined also that people who really were entitled to refugee status got it, and we protected people, and we were very humanitarian about it. But because over the years, different definitions have been applied by organizations to what is or is not the right basis for asylum, I'm afraid that makes perhaps a lot of people think that the only way in which they can now move around is by claiming asylum and hoping that their case will meet certain basic requirements.
But as a former minister who worked with a body of civil servants to try and crack this problem, I'm intrigued to know when you say that needs to be sorted out. In the last 48 hours on television, I've seen the case of one person who was crossing the channel in an inflatable boat, who was fleeing Afghanistan because he had been a supporter of what we were doing as the UK in Afghanistan and feared for his life. And another family who'd come from Iraq. And when the mum was asked, why didn't you stop in France or in Germany? She said, oh, it's just so much better in the UK. I mean, if journalism can capture that, for God's sake, surely Border Force, the Immigration Department and ministers can capture it and sort it.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? It's depending on the sheer... Yes, you would think so and hope so. I mean, where we have failed in this country for many years now, and including, I think, at the time when I was there too, we failed to return people, which we're legally allowed to do, to countries where they have been, which are free, after they've left their sort of place where they shouldn't, didn't want to be. I think the difficulty we got now, of course, outside of the European Union, we're not part of the Dublin Convention. I was one of the people that drafted that convention, Dublin III, which allowed all European countries to return those who arrived to a safe place within Europe where they had come from. So getting people back to France, for instance, would have been more automatic and more useful than it is when we're not in the EU and not then subject to that same convention. There's all kinds of things here which concern me. The United Nations have resettlement plans for Afghanistan. They're only just getting off the ground, but I was responsible for the Bosnian resettlement, the United Nations one, back in 1996. We took an agreed number of refugees from Bosnia who had every right to be classed as refugees. We took them under the United Nations auspices. I hope that the United Nations actually, dealing with people, say, from Afghanistan, can take a bigger role and make sure that people are allocated to different countries, not just this country, because they happen to want to come here, that is not the basis upon which asylum should be granted.
You mentioned Brexit there. Do you think, as many do, that there is a very strong element of Brexit debt settling within this, whether it's fishing licences off the Channel Island or in the North Sea, or whether it's the beaches of Calais? You know, this is not only Macron, the Elysee Palace, but also EU in Brussels, kind of reading the riot act to everybody else. You behave badly and we'll do to you what we're currently doing to the United Kingdom.
Well, I think it's a little bit overstated, actually. It depends where you're coming from on this one. I mean, Macron's got an election in April. Yep. Clearly, there's a French sort of attitude here. And we have, to be fair, we have been mucking around a bit with the French for a while over a number of other issues in which perhaps a more diplomatic approach might have worked rather better. I mean, sensitivities, particularly in the area of immigration and asylum, I have to say, are really important. Yeah. I mean, I we all want to shout at each other. We'll say, oh, those French or those Germans or whatever. And now we're outside of the European Union. Of course, there is a view in the EU that Britain is a third country and therefore it isn't entitled to the same things it was entitled to. And from our point of view, we're trying to prove all the time the global status of our country and the fact that we're jolly good on our own. Thank you very much, Mr. French. The point is, we really have to settle down. Immigration is a sensitive area, which politically is of great interest to the British public. It's way above all the other things you can think of, I'm afraid, even, I suspect, more than COVID at the moment. Immigration is a sensitive area, and therefore I think politicians should be very careful not to just try and win votes on it. They ought to try and actually solve the issues.
Yeah. Both sides of the channel, I think we both might agree on that as well, which takes me neatly. You raised diplomacy there. I found the Johnson-Macron exchanges, and I did it on my 8 o'clock programme last night, as utterly demeaning, a low point for both sides. And ironically, within Johnson's letter, there are several really good, strong points, some of which you may agree with or disagree with yourself. I mean, I certainly thought it made sense. But to send it privately to the French president and then go on to Twitter and say, this is what I'm saying, and then to hear the French president at a press conference live on television saying, this is just silly, this is disappointing, calm down, grow up. There are people dying out there, and these two are behaving like playground loonies.
Well, it's not for me to try and lecture my own government. I'm not going to do that. But what I would
if you did it discreetly and quietly, Tim, they might listen to you.
Well, I might do it discreetly. And how do you know I'm not doing that? All I'd say to you is this: if you actually want to put an idea or two, and I agree with you, there were some good ideas there. We want to put those ideas to the French president at a very sensitive moment and try and get some kind of agreement. What you do is you contact the French president. You don't actually go to Twitter. We all love Twitter. I use Twitter all the time. And it's not exactly the place where I want a private exchange to take place. Nor do you go to one of the leading newspapers in the UK and give them this information ahead. Actually, I think the French are suggesting ahead of the president actually seeing it. Come on. If I turned this on its head the other way round, it was coming the other way, I would be absolutely furious. And, of course, as I said, election in April, French people getting a bit fed up in some ways about the government and, the need to try and sort of show ability to control and run the country and so on. Macron, I understand why it happened, but for goodness sake, from our point of view, we are the masters of diplomacy. We have some of the leading diplomats and ex-diplomats in the world. We are an excellent example. Normally, let's just get back to that kind of approach, and I think we will then get some really good outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, you and I are both of an age to have known and admired Peter Carrington from afar. The very idea of Peter doing anything remotely like this, just jaw-dropping.
But even more lately, even Lord Jay, for instance, who's with us, and Peter Ricketts, both former French ambassadors to Paris. I mean, they are people who, they knew what discretion was about. They knew what privacy was about. And they also knew how to get a real gain for the UK. There's no loss to us in doing it that way. No loss. The losses are if you do it the way which we seem to be doing it at the moment, where we're not going to get any credibility. We're outside of the union. or outside of the deals that we used to have, but we still need to have arrangements in place, don't we?
Yeah. Final point, and although she has her critics, and I'm keenly aware of that, in this exchange diplomatically she is entirely innocent, but the Home Secretary Priti Patel, who really could have made some progress with her officials at that meeting tomorrow, is now told by the French Interior Minister, don't come, we don't want you.
Yeah, I think that's most unfortunate, because that meeting was not just with the French. That meeting was with other Home Office ministers from around Europe, all of whom have interest because of the European border and because of their own issues with asylum seekers and all of that. It would have been a very, very useful meeting. I think operating just bilaterally with one country is not perhaps in our future interests. We need to talk to European leaders more widely. I hope actually that somewhere we'll get a compromise on that and she can still go. But certainly officials on their own will do a good job, no doubt, but it isn't quite the same.
Absolutely right. Great to talk to you, Tim, and thank you very much indeed for breaking into your Saturday afternoon.
Not at all. Pleasure, Alistair. Thank you very much.
Whether or not you are having those discreet conversations with the Prime Minister or whomsoever, I wish you well. I hope you are, and I hope a time will come when you can come back onto the programme.
And thank you very much for our discreet conversation as well, Alistair.
Good to see you. God bless. That's Lord Timothy Kirkhope, Tim Kirkhope, former Immigration Minister, speaking from the heart with loyalty, but great perception as well. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon. Is your trolley dictating how much you spend on shopping? Apparently so, according to a new study. We'll have more on that with a consumer psychologist. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, in the UK is looking very windy and bitterly cold, with Storm Arwen still making its presence felt. Let's take a look at the details. Skies should be brighter across southwest England, but gale-force northerly wind will continue to drive in further showers, especially across Cornwall. Feeling bitterly cold too there. Cloudier skies for London and the southeast, with further outbreaks of rain and sleet possible. Again, it will be windy with highs of just 6 degrees Celsius. Much of Wales will see sunshine, though there will be some coastal showers. Still very windy for many. Pennine areas of northwest England could remain quite cloudy, but further west there'll be some sunshine. Again, it's still windy, though winds will gradually be easing down and feeling bitterly cold for all. Plenty of showers will continue to feed in across northeast England, bringing in a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Strong northerly winds will enhance the bitterly cold feel, with highs not much above freezing. It will at least be a fairly pleasant day across central Scotland, with plenty of sunshine to close out the afternoon. Again, it will be very cold there as well. Finally, to Northern Ireland, where the strong northerly winds will continue to blow in a few showers, some of which could be wintry. Highs in Belfast around 5 Celsius. Winds will continue to slowly ease for most areas, with temperatures then falling sharply under clear skies.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. Now, many of us have been lured into unplanned spending by the officers at the shop checkout, things like sweeties for kids while you're waiting there to try and get your credit card to work. But did you ever think a shopping trolley itself could actually cause you to dip into your pockets a little more? Well, researchers have found that repositioning the handles on the shopping trolleys could cause shoppers to buy more and, of course, boost supermarket sales by as much as 25%. But why would such a small change of the position of the handles be having this kind of impact on our spending? We talked long and hard about it in our planning meeting and thought we need the answers. Therefore, we have invited consumer psychologist and behavioural scientist Nisa Bayinda onto the programme to explain all. Have you seen this story and are you aware of it?
Yes, and I have read the study as well.
The difference between holding the trolley like that and holding it like that. How does that make me buy 15 packets of X rather than 10 packets of X?
Yeah, so the study argues that instead of extending our muscles and using our triceps, we will be using our biceps, and biceps increase motivation, consideration, and therefore it increases the variety and quantity of spending or purchases. That's what they argue. However, there are many other factors at play when consumers are shopping. So it's an interesting concept, interesting study, but it also raises a lot of further questions. You know, how exactly can this be the magic bullet?
On that very first point, that is genuinely intriguing because that bit I hadn't clocked. So it's not only which muscles are being exercised, it's the impact on the buzz you feel and your positive attitude because you're getting, I don't know, adrenaline or whatever it is, pumped up towards your brain, making, yeah, I'm going to buy.
Mm-hmm. There were previous studies on the triceps and how triceps versus biceps. So biceps, when we pull towards us, how that increases in general consideration. So what they did is they have applied this to the consumer kind of milieu. And the findings are interesting. They have found that the parallel handles, like a walker handle, I suppose, or a wheelbarrow, it increases involvement with the shopping trolley. And therefore, when we are maybe picking up a product and looking at it, we maybe examine it a bit more. And if we are buying a bottle of water, we might be also considering a fizzy drink. So it is very interesting. It's a robust study. They have done field work in Europe in a supermarket with a good sample size. On the other hand, they've also done simulation in a lab environment, and they have looked at muscle movement and how it triggers behavior. What is missing, though, is the buying power of the participants. So we don't know the age brackets, we don't know their economical background, we don't know how they were feeling, in essence, the effect or their mood. We don't know if they were doing their weekly shopping. So we don't know the context of the experiment. And that is very important for consumer psychology or behavioral sciences to really put two and two together and start claiming, okay, this will definitely impact shopping behavior by this much.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, way back when, Jack Cohen set up Tesco and the very, very famous mantra, stack it high and sell it cheap. These guys nowadays, whether it's Asda, Lidl or whomsoever, are consciously coming to people like you and spending big bucks on finding out what happens to our little brains when we go in there with our little list.
Consumer psychology is not as widespread as we would like it to be. And of course, there is consumer welfare and ethical questions when consumer psychology is applied. So it's not always about selling more, but of course, from an atmospherics perspective, so how the retail environment is organized, how the shelves are stacked, how does it smell like in the shop, or how is it lit? These things are all affecting consumer behavior because it essentially makes it more desirable to shop or less desirable to shop. So the novelty of the fact that the shopping trolley has parallel handles instead of the pushing behavior, it can potentially increase ownership, a sense of ownership, and definitely involvement. But it might be that maybe someone was there, they've just been paid, their wallet is full, and they're there to do the big shop.
Yeah.
Versus,
and
there
finally,
might be someone who is.
Yep, sorry, I understood that. But finally, the masters of this are IKEA, and the amount of work they've put into the route that you take, that you cannot deviate from, that's all about spending patterns as you go round.
Of course, they don't necessarily allow you to take a shortcut unless you're really savvy in an IKEA shop. So these are all, of course, planned, and they do work with scientists and professionals to make sure that they set up the environment accurately and properly. And when it comes to shopping trolleys, they haven't really been updated since the 40s. So we've been using the same style of shopping carts since the 30s and 40s, since they were invented. So it is interesting. However, there are other factors at play.
Sure.
There might be students that, who might not be able to do a big shop, and they can't really increase the quantity or the variety of the products they buy. I think it is very interesting. It's a good start, but the study will have to be replicated. Demographics will need to be factored in. But it was interesting to read.
I totally agree with you, and we shall watch this space. Nisa Binder, great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And that was all about trolleys and what have you. It's just coming up to 1 minute past 1, and you are watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News, and we've plenty more to come this afternoon, so do please stay with us. And at exactly 1 minute past 1. Hello and welcome back if you've been with me since noon. Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter across the country. We've plenty still to come. We'll have more on our big discussion. That's about defence, what you want, what you're frightened of, and how much you're prepared to pay for it. As threats build and threats are redefined, how safe do you feel? And are the UK's defences up to those challenges? But first, with a full roundup of the news, here is Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. This is your news. Just past 1 o'clock. COVID vaccines are being altered amid concerns the new variant Omicron could be resistant. Germany is the second country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. Pfizer expects to be able to produce a tailor-made jab in 100 days, while Novavax says it will have a vaccine ready to test in the next few weeks. Overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the variant was first detected. The strain has also been found in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium.
Once you detect it, it's probably too late to stop it completely from getting into the country, but delaying more people bringing in this variant to compound the current problem we have with Delta virus is something that's really important. We react quickly. We know from previous experience that dithering and delaying in doing things and just paying attention to what virus is coming from where has landed us in trouble in the past. So just being a bit more cautious and preempting a problem is quite important.
Two men have died after being struck by trees as Storm Arwen hit the UK with 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. One man was killed in County Antrim yesterday afternoon and a second died in Cumbria last night. More than 1,000 homes have experienced power cuts across the UK. Amber and yellow weather warnings remain in place and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan has said he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azim Rafiq has experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq told MPs he experienced institutional racism at Yorkshire. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. Tributes have poured in for the American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim, who's died at age 91. He was best known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and The West Side Story. Andrew Lloyd Webber says he was a musical theatre giant, and director Steven Spielberg says he was a gigantic figure in American culture. We are being warned that pharmacists are on a knife edge amid burnout concerns in Scotland. A new survey from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society found almost 9 in 10 people working in the sector fear they are at risk of burning out. It was also found nearly a third are considering quitting. Claire Morrison, the Scotland director for the RPS, called the findings unacceptable. Hundreds of migrants from Central America and Haiti have formed a new caravan in southern Mexico and are walking north toward the United States border. Around 1,000 people, many carrying children, began walking from a city bordering Guatemala and are planning to join another group and keep marching north. The migrants say their patience has run out over promised humanitarian visas that would allow them to work and reside in Mexico. And the festive season has finally begun in Parliament, marked by an arrival of a gigantic Christmas tree. Parliamentary staff used a crane to unload and decorate the 42-foot tall tree. The rare spruce was selected from the 60,000-hectare Kielder Forest in Northumberland, the biggest, in fact, in England. And Royal Mail has announced the regional winners of a competition for young people to design stamps based on heroes of the pandemic. Children aged 4 to 14 designed stamps to celebrate a range of people, including NHS workers, parents and teachers. The Prince of Wales will select the final 8 designs. That's your latest headlines. I'll be back in half an hour. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. I am Alastair Stewart, and until 3 o'clock I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, in around an hour, you'll be hearing my take on our main discussion today. When it comes to defence policy, what is it that we're defending, and are our defences up to that task? Plus, 2 men have been killed by falling trees as Storm Arwen lashes parts of the United Kingdom with high winds, rain and even snow. Gusts reached speeds of 98 miles an hour in Northumberland, and about 120 lorries became stuck in snow on the M62. So, what's behind the wild weather? We'll be speaking to a meteorologist about all of that. And a world-leading Down syndrome bill has cleared its first hurdle in Parliament. Legislation has government support and is likely to become law. I'll be speaking to one of the people involved in drafting that bill. And as always, GB News is all about you, our viewers. Any burning questions or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small they may appear, we genuinely want to hear them. So do get your voice heard by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, and do please put Alastair Stewart in the subject line. So in March, the Defence Review saw a smarter, intelligence and cyber-driven military to meet the real threats of the day and the immediate future to the United Kingdom. Then just a couple of days ago, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace published Future Soldier, a knock-on from that Spring Defence Review, but he told MPs a restructuring and reorganisation of units will take place in the coming years, with the regular army standing at 73,000 by 2025. Well,
Far from being deprived of investment, as some claim, we are injecting £41.3 billion into army equipment and support this decade, £8.6 billion more than had been planned prior to the integrated review. We are using those funds to create a modern, innovative and digitised army. Our future army will be leaner but more productive, prioritising speed and readiness over mass and mobilisation, but still be over 100,000 strong, integrating regulars and reserves, as well as all the civil servants and partners from the private sector. When it comes to global engagement, we have formed the new Army Special Operations Brigade, in which the new Ranger regiments will sit, Also, we've established a Security Force Assistance Brigade and set up a NATO holding area in Sedelager, Germany. In terms of warfighting, we've reinforced NATO's Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, established new brigade combat teams, and reinforced the Army's Global Response Force.
Well, as we heard there from Ben Wallace, defence is a fluid thing. We must assess the enemy, assess what he's up to, and act accordingly. So, what we're defending against chops and changes, and so must policy and strategy. Today I'm asking, what are we defending? How safe do you feel? And are the UK's defences up to the challenges? We have already had one Admiral, Chris Parry, on the programme, giving his view, saying, yes, we have a coherent defence strategy, we're in NATO, we have smarter defences as well, and we are keenly aware of Russia and China. I am delighted to be joined by yet another former Admiral, but more importantly, also a former Security Minister. And there he sits, Admiral Lord West. Great to see you, my Lord, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. In your view, and I underline the fact that you're a former serving Admiral at the top of the Royal Navy and served in government, in your view, is there now a clear, coherent defence strategy, or are we still chopping and changing?
I think we do have a fairly clear defence strategy. I think we had lost our way a bit. We ended up sort of trying to do nation building in Central Asia and Southwest Asia, something that's not a clever idea to try and do in countries that are absolutely incredibly corrupt and also have not really had stability for many years, and we lost our way. And I think a lot of money was invested, for example, in the army, in operations within Afghanistan and before that in Iraq. I think now we've got a much clearer view that we need to focus on global stability. We need to confront the sort of threats that are changing so much in the world. I mean, everyone talks about it. It's trite. Cyber, obviously, cyber is clearly very, very important. Space, which indeed, we have been using space for many years. I was very involved in the 90s, getting our first space program going, but we need even more involvement in that. I think the government realised that, and one's seen that in our defence policy. When one's looking at what I might call ISTAR, all the intelligence and targeting systems, so that you're one jump ahead of anyone you end up having to fight, I think we have got a clear view of where we want to go there. I think the only thing I would say is that we still have not actually had the sort of investment in defence that was really required. And although the Defence Secretary talked about extra money, that extra money came, but it didn't really cover the huge costs that we already had incurred. And there's a real problem actually about funding some of the things we need. And there's no doubt that actual numbers make a difference. It's all very well being very, very clever, but if, for example, the cleverest ship in the world, well, it's one ship, it's in one place at one time. When we talk about the army, one has to have worries about some of the secondary roles they do when they're looking after us within this country, for example. It's all very well being razor sharp, cyber savvy, satellite savvy, being able to operate like that. But actually, if you want to be in this country sorting out COVID, that doesn't help you very much.
Sure. I'll come to that specifically in a minute, but let me pick up on that point on spending, because it has struck me as being absolutely fundamental. You and I have done a bit over the years to support the Royal British Legion, and that's partly reflection, and we see it every November, of the deep-rooted love and affection that this country has for its armed services, past and present. But when it comes to funding, everybody worships the NHS and bungs whatever money it needs and more at it. But when it comes to that defence structure that we love and respect and wear poppies for and what have you, oh no, it's a bit more of a political football. I mean, does that intellectually surprise you, Alan?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right there. I mean, basically, within our country, we're very lucky. The normal person in this country still loves Jack and still loves a Tommy. You know, he likes the individuals, and he is willing to do all sorts of things for them. When it comes to the broader issue of defence spending, it's very hard to persuade them that they need to spend that money because they don't feel immediately threatened. And I think that is actually very worrying now, because certainly I feel we're at a more dangerous time than at any time in my, and I'm still actually a serving admiral, having been a First Sea Lord, but at any time in my 56 years of service, I think we're probably at one of the most dangerous times now. In terms of the nuclear clock, I think the nuclear clock that moves up towards midnight because of the behavior of Putin, you know, the extraordinary things he's done with cyber attacks, you know, the anti-satellite missile he's fired, oil supplies coming into Europe, the whole business of threatening Ukraine. You know, he did a WMD attack in Salisbury. Goodness knows what he's doing, but my goodness me, this is dangerous. And he loosely talks about use of nuclear weapons, as does the leader of Belarus. And, you know, there's all that incident on the border. This is highly, highly dangerous. I think we're nearer in the nuclear clock to, by miscalculation, a mistake going on than we've ever been. And, you know, we need to keep our nuclear weapons for that reason. But what we do need to do is really embark on a major program of trying to get the number of nuclear agreements there were and ties with countries that really don't like us, but so that we could talk to them. We must put huge effort into that. But taking that nuclear stuff aside, you know, there is no doubt China have made it very clear they wish to be the greatest power in the world by 2030. Xi Jinping has said that. And global stability is hugely important to our nation. Again, our public sort of forget this. Our public forget that we run global shipping from London. Global shipping are the sinews of the wealth of our little global village. You know, and we run it from London. And we are the biggest European investor in South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific. All of that is very important for our balance of payments. Now, again, the public aren't aware of that. And I think the fact that we're looking at a global Britain, it's easy to laugh at it, but global stability is very important. And one thing that competent and capable armed forces do, they are good at stopping wars and stabilising. There's no doubt the carrier battle group, for example, going out to the Far East, lots of people said, oh, this is doing this, that, and the other. Actually, it's been immensely successful. The Chinese and the Russians don't like it, my goodness me. And they said lots of silly things, but they know, should it come to a crunch today, at this present time, it might change in the future, you know, we would actually give them a good frapping with that carrier battle group, whether they be Chinese or Russians, and, you know, then home for tea and medals. I mean, they know that, and that's why they're so nervous about it.
Yeah.
But we need to show that we're willing to have strong force. But the British people think, well, hang on, as you very rightly say, I want money spent on my National Health Service. I want to look after Granny and this sort of thing. You can understand it, but they need to be aware of the risks that are there. In Holland, before the Second World War, they probably had some of the best medical services in Europe. My goodness me, by 1945, they were starving to death. And our bombers were having to drop food to them. That's what happens when you forget about defence, because everything else suddenly falls apart.
Let me pick out one crucial thing that you just mentioned there about China building up her nuclear forces and Queen Elizabeth having been sailing out in that neck of the woods recently to much publicity and terrific pictures and what have you. If China invaded Taiwan, would we take action against China alongside the Americans in defence of Taiwan?
Well, I mean, that is a very, very big political question, of course. I would like, if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd have said that actually it looked very likely that there was going to be something happening in Taiwan. I think that's eased back slightly, but it's still highly risky, and the way China's behaving is dangerous. And when their economy is slightly dodgy, which it is. Countries like China look outwards to find excuses for things. So there is a real risk. Now, would we join America? Well, the Americans have actually supported us rather well. You might say they're always a bit late, but in the Second World War, they were crucial. In the First World War, they joined us as well. You know, there are a lot of dead Americans in Europe, and there's no doubt that UK and US were the key parts of NATO which stopped the Soviet Union invading Europe. When the Soviet Union collapsed, we saw their war plans. They were very intent at various stages on invading Western Europe. NATO stopped that, and it was only the American involvement, and indeed the amount we spent, that stopped that happening. Now, America has committed to do that. I think it will be difficult politically for our leaders to say we're not going to be involved in this. It's not like the Vietnam War. It's rather different from that. And I think it will be a very, very difficult political decision. It will be quite fascinating.
And an incredibly difficult one to pick up on your very perceptive point earlier on about the public willingness to pay for things and disquiet with nation building, you know, what's that got to do with us and what have you, to try and sell the idea of UK Brit soldiers, sailors and airmen going to war over Taiwan in the Far East ain't going to play terribly well in the United Kingdom home vote.
You are absolutely right. You know, why? I mean, even within Europe, there were people who said, well, what if the Soviets, going back to Cold War time, invaded Germany? Well, if they haven't invaded us, are we willing to all die for this? And the answer is, if you don't show you're willing to, then people will do it. Now, that doesn't ring the withers of most people. And to get the British public to say, yes, we should join America if Taiwan's attacked, to defend it, I think that's a very difficult one. Very difficult one. A lot of people wouldn't want to get involved in doing that. And certainly as China is now spending a lot of money on its nuclear weapons because it basically had a policy of having the absolute minimum of nuclear weapons, and it's similar to us, so that if anyone attacked them using it, they could use them. But realize that if there's going to be a war with America, it's no good having the minimum. They need a lot more, and that's what they're embarking on, which again makes one very worried. And if you've got a very heavily nuclear-armed country, and there's a war starts out there, you can imagine there's quite a reluctance amongst the public to get involved. It would be a very difficult one.
I agree 100%. Final question, and again, you referred to it earlier on in the conversation I've hugely enjoyed because it's perceptive, informative, and absolutely on the money. But almost as a passing line, you talked about servicemen and women playing, as it were, a community role, whether it's shoring up defences against a flooding river, and we're seeing that right now with this ghastly Arwen, or helping out the COVID exercise and being there jabbing, or even going back to the London Olympics, finally sorting out the ticket system because only the army could do it. This is not what they joined up for, and yet they seem to embrace it and the public adore it.
Absolutely. And although you can say they didn't join up, it's not the military's for, in a sense, it is. The military are a disciplined arm of our nation that is available to help the security and safety of our people. That's part of their job. So it's not just purely major operational, fighting in some far off land. It's actually looking after our people across the board, and you need men for that. So similarly, for example, I think the waters around UK, we have far too few Royal Naval ships. I mean, no other country in the world has so few looking after its own waters. We have some 3,000 square miles of territorial seas with wind farms, undersea pipelines, with cable lines carrying all of the internet and things like this. And yet we've got 4 ships looking after this. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it's amazing we got away with it for so long. One can see in the Channel the issue of the people coming across. Not that I'm saying that stop picking them up doesn't stop the flow. The only way to stop the flow is actually return them to France. But initially we were unable even to do that. And there's terrorists can come in, smuggling. Now there are government agencies to do this, but the overall package we have is not good, and it takes lots of people. If you want to board a ship, you've got to have people to board it. If you want to fight a ship, you need hardly any because you can just sink it. And you've got clever technology to do it. And the same applies to the army, and that's where numbers matter.
Yeah, I was going to end it there, but I can't resist a final question. Bet you're dead chuffed that the next Chief of the Defence Staff then is a fellow First Sea Lord Tony Radakin there, waving the flag, I think after 2 decades for the Royal Navy.
Absolutely, and he's a very good man. The only thing is, once you become CDS, Chief of Defence Staff, you of course have got to be very purple. You've got to be very tri-service, and he's been doing very well as First Sea Lord. I'm sure his successor will be very good as well, Ben Key. But I think the biggest issue that actually he will have, and I did say this to him when I talked to him, is the Army. I think we've talked about this restructuring. The Army have got real problems, and I think there will have to be a focus on this restructuring. I think there are morale issues there, and I think he will find that takes up quite a lot of his time.
Fascinating. Great to talk to you, Alan. Thank you very much indeed for your time and for breaking into your afternoon to be with us. Look forward to talking to you again soon. That's Admiral Lord Alan West, former First Sea Lord and Minister as well. Great to hear his thoughts there, not only on the real and tangible threat at a nuclear level, but also the fact that actually the men and women today who join our armed services are keenly aware of that community function and see it as part of our defence, defending our population against things like COVID, against things like flooding and all the rest of it. Great perceptive thoughts. Now, you may, nevertheless, I agree with a lot of what he said. You may disagree. Don't forget, do let me know, because I really want to hear your views. At 2 o'clock, we'll be dedicating a whole chunk of time to those opinions from you and your stories on our defence policy. Remember what I said right at the beginning of the programme. If you're a serving man or woman, or if you have served in any of the 3 armed services, I'd particularly like to hear from you. What are we defending? How safe do you feel? And are the UK's defences up to those challenges? If you haven't already done so, then do please email me your thoughts. Or you can even send a video, if you like, to gbviews@gbnews.uk. And you can also get in touch on Twitter, Instagram and on Facebook. Still to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, we'll have the latest on why the UK is experiencing such turbulent weather conditions. So, see you in a few moments.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking very windy and bitterly cold, with Storm Arwen still making its presence felt. Let's take a look at the details. Skies should be brighter across southwest England, but gale-force northerly wind will continue to drive in further showers, especially across Cornwall. Feeling bitterly cold too there. Cloudier skies for London and the southeast, with further outbreaks of rain and sleet possible. Again, it will be windy with highs of just 6 degrees Celsius. Much of Wales will see sunshine, though there will be some coastal showers. Still very windy for many. Pennine areas of northwest England could remain quite cloudy, but further west there'll be some sunshine. Again, it's still windy, though winds will gradually be easing down and feeling bitterly cold for all. Plenty of showers will continue to feed in across northeast England, bringing in a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Strong northerly winds will enhance the bitterly cold feel, with highs not much above freezing. It will at least be a fairly pleasant day across central Scotland, with plenty of sunshine to close out the afternoon. Again, it will be very cold there as well. Finally, to Northern Ireland, where the strong northerly winds will continue to blow in a few showers, some of which could be wintry. Highs in Belfast around 5 Celsius. Winds will continue to slowly ease for most areas, with temperatures then falling sharply under clear skies.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge. and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You are watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. Now, you just have to look out of the window to see how wild the weather is, with Storm Arwen wreaking havoc across the country. While the red weather warning expired in the early hours of this morning, the Met Office says amber and yellow warnings for wind remain in place, with the expectations of some very strong gusts in many areas. Some parts of the country have seen heavy snowfalls overnight in cities, with some roads closed and power cuts reported as well. Joining us now is the senior meteorologist at the British Weather Service's Jim Dale. Jim, great to have seen you. I mean, in a sense, first things first.
Hello, Alistair.
This is a good example of getting the warnings out there quickly, although there's still been disruption, lorries screwed up, roads blocked and what have you. But at least we're able to say, hey, watch out, Arwen's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good thing, because meteorologists get criticised quite quickly when we don't get it right, or we don't put these warnings out in time. And this one, I actually wrote about this last Sunday, not so much in the wind category, more towards the cold, the snow potential, and all the rest of it. The winds the potential winds develops more or less in midweek as to the ferocity of them, potential ferocity, and hey presto, they've come true. So I think big ticks in the right direction for the meteorologists in this case, ourselves at British Weather Services, and also obviously the Met Office.
Yeah, sure. Which areas, in your view, have been hardest hit?
Depends what you're looking at. If you're looking at the wind, certainly northeastern areas, Scotland. Having said that, when you look at the diversity of the gusts, they go right around the sort of periphery of the country. So that from northeast England right through northeast Scotland, and then round the corner into the north of Northern Ireland. We know there's been 2 fatalities, sadly, in diverse areas, one in the northeast and one in Northern Ireland, Antrim area, with trees falling. So really, this has been a storm that has affected most, not everybody. And the snow side of things, essentially still snowing in the Highlands and Grampians. You might expect that to a large degree. I think the snow elsewhere is kind of dying away. But I know last night the M62, the Rochdale area, those sort of the higher ground, got badly affected, and lorries got stuck, numerous lorries, which I find that quite surprising, given all the warnings that high-sided vehicles in particular find themselves on the road in those sort of situations when you've got amber and particularly the red warnings out there.
Frustrates you, because that thought crossed my mind when we were looking at the pictures of the lorries as well. I mean, down in Hampshire, if you tell me that there's going to be a storm, then we make sure the horses are okay, we make sure everything in the outbuildings is locked down and shut down and what have you. The idea of saying, I've heard the warning, but I'm still going to deliver my load to Manchester.
There's a real element of that in the British psyche, that we hear the warning, we sort of see it and maybe register it to a certain degree, but what you do then do about it, it's kind of as per normal. Now, we send out these alerts to the likes of logistics firms. So if I mention a couple, FedEx and DHL for 2, they're well aware of what's going on. And I don't know how they operate from that point onwards, how they actually say to their drivers, you shouldn't go here, or you should do this, or be on the lookout, or whatever. But just as we get warnings for COVID, as in red, you can't travel, you can't go, maybe the weather, when you get a red, and that's that serious danger to life, something similar perhaps you shouldn't really be on the roads, and it's down to, maybe down commercial firms side of things. Why do they venture out when you get conditions such as you're seeing now on TV? The potential is there, and it's a bit like putting your head in the oven, in a hot oven, in a sense. So I'm not sure why that actually happens. I guess, as I say, people take the weather for granted. It's one of the first things I will say is in my book, which I'll show you briefly. I do actually start by saying we do take the weather for granted in very many ways. We don't actually act upon it, and yet I believe that the weather is the biggest impactor on our external impactor on our lives, bar COVID at this moment in time. But even that's affected by the weather, as we've seen in the summer and the winter, the differences that can occur. So it's very much to be sort of negotiated, the weather, whether it be calm or whether it be like with Storm Arwen and storms to come.
Indeed, wise words. Jim Dale, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Jim Dale, Senior Meteorologist.
Yes, thank you.
Good to see you. Now, if you have been hit by that bad weather, where are you? Please do send pictures via email to gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to share those with other people. I mean, not least because, as Jim said, if you're told there's a weather warning out there, listen to it and act according to it, because it's not just pretty pictures of snow on the garden, it can be pretty dangerous, and it is always worth listening to those warnings. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, still to come this afternoon. Plans to ensure that people with Down syndrome get lifelong care have passed the first hurdle on the way to becoming law in England. I'll be speaking to one of the people involved in drafting that bill very shortly. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news headlines. Here's Bethany.
Good afternoon. Here are the latest headlines. COVID vaccines are being altered amid concerns the new variant, Omicron, could be resistant. Germany is the second country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. And overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the first variant was detected. There are also cases in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium. 2 men have been killed by falling trees as Storm Arwen brought 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. One man died in County Antrim yesterday afternoon, while a second died in Cumbria last night. Yellow weather warnings remain in place across the country, and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan says he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azeem Rafiq experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq told MPs he faced institutional racism at Yorkshire. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. And tributes have poured in for the former American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim, who's died at age 91. He was best known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and West Side Story. Andrew Lloyd Webber says he was a musical theatre giant. You're right up to date. I'll be back at 2 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Now, plans to ensure that people with Down syndrome get lifelong care have passed the first hurdle on the way to being law in England. The former Defence Secretary, Dr Liam Fox MP, who is former Cabinet Minister, used his private member's bill to introduce the legislation and has really championed the issue. The bill has government support and therefore is likely to become law. Campaigners say the bill is more necessary now than ever because people with Down syndrome are starting to outlive their parents. I am genuinely delighted, because I've been so excited by this story over the last 72 hours, to be joined here in the studio by Ken Ross, who is the founding officer of the Down Syndrome Policy Group. First and foremost, because we were chatting about it just while we settled in and what have you, Liam Fox was not necessarily the obvious candidate to lead the fight, and to be able to persuade an MP to use his private member's bill slot with his seniority is phenomenal and crucial to your success. Why was Liam involved?
Well, so you're absolutely right. I mean, the chance of someone having a private member's bill is pretty rare. He was on the front benches for so long, so he actually there's probably a tiny piece of time in history that he could have really have come out of the ballot and coming out in a position where his bill would have an opportunity to be read on a sitting Friday as the first matter of business was incredible. I believe he was approached by nearly 3,000 organisations to use his private member's bill. But from speaking to Liam, he has an assistant called Annabelle Toole. Her son Freddie was on one of the photographs just now. Who's 22. Liam knows Freddie really well. Liam also grew up next to someone who has Down syndrome. And one of the things when you once you know people with Down syndrome, you're involved with people with Down syndrome, you can start to think, well, actually, why am I not seeing more of you? Where are you? Where are you at school? Where are you in the workplace? All of those questions come to light, and they probably nag at people for periods of time.
Playing devil's advocate, though, and you know perfectly well, I'm totally on side. But how is it in the 21st century that we need a bill like this to be passed to enshrine the rights of just another group of people who happen to have a chromosomal difference from other people? I mean, that is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to say that there's legislation which should protect everyone. Yeah. And when you say protect, it's actually thinking about how do you include people. Yeah. Well, people with Down syndrome have very specific learning profiles. They have a very specific set of needs, which unfortunately just aren't catered for with generic laws. And every time someone says, no, we already have these laws, well, actually, when you look at the end product, with 6% of people with learning disabilities actually being in employment, which is an NHS digital figure, it doesn't matter what policies people think we've got. If they think they work, they clearly don't, because only 6% of people actually have a job. And personally, I think that's absolutely outrageous, because what are people meant to do? If you're never allowed to have a job, what are you meant to do for most of your life, where most of us are at work for most of our lives? And it's something which, it needs to happen. It can't just happen in the workplace. Sure. It has to happen before then.
But the real progress has tended to be made by very specific groups of people, like the acting fraternity, for example, one or two standout examples of brilliant people who have Down syndrome, but act and play fantastic roles and what have you. I gather such was the feeling within the group that you had a little bit of a celebration when this passed through. You're rubbing your forehead. Is it still rolling on the morning after the night before?
Yeah, it was fabulous. And seeing actors like Tommy Jessup, and I've been privileged to make a film with Tommy Jessup in a lead role. And again, it was a film where it showed someone with Down syndrome in a really powerful position. in a very assertive role, because too many roles, and it's great that there are roles because it raises visibility, but too many roles are pity roles, and that just, that's the old cliche. We don't want that anymore. People with Down syndrome, they're not needy. As Liam said, this isn't about charity. This is about having a piece of legislation that will actually allow people to live their own lives, because at the moment they're hamstrung from doing that.
Yeah, you and your wife drafted this bill, didn't you?
We did. We wrote the first draft, and we're very, very pleased with how it's ended up. I mean, to go from first draft in June to where we are now, it has been a roller coaster. I mean, the last 6 months have been non-stop. Having someone like Liam Fox with his seniority to work with all the different departments of government, because the bill, although it's very simple, it goes across all areas of government, and that's what makes it quite tricky.
And we should remind folk at home, you know perfectly well, as indeed do I, that it's still a lottery. So it was chance. Maybe there were other forces at play that let Liam's name come out of the lottery, quite literally, and then for Liam to decide, OK, I've got the slot, this is what I'm going to do about it. I mean, it is chance. It's chance. And, when someone has the chance to introduce a private member's bill, again, someone who's so senior, they really want it to work. If he'd been, I still think, if he was a new intake of MPs, he'd probably be dealing with some government business on this, which was primarily government business. But Liam really wanted to raise this cause, and the amount of work he's done and his team, David Goss, he's based in Parliament for Liam, it's just work. I mean, I'm in awe as to how hard these guys have worked in terms of shaping it, getting involved with all the different departments. So refreshing when you see Parliament working well and doing what so many people out there want. But the other thing that strikes me about this, and thinking long and hard, my big brother, who is now in his 70s, one of his best friends, had a sibling who had Down syndrome. And that's a long, long time ago. And as a family, they worked with that challenge, and it became wonderfully rewarding all the way through. But in those days, it was not uncommon, and perhaps it still is, for folk to have all of the tests that are available. And if that test shows that the embryo does have Down syndrome, then termination was still an option for very many people. That's tough, and it's not for me to judge people, and I wouldn't dream of doing that. But do you feel we've moved on from that? Or is that still a challenge? Well, I think it's still a challenge. So a big part of the bill as well around creating legislation is about creating awareness. And the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, who have 5 adult members with Down syndrome who've been involved in every meeting, every week since May, in trying to form and shape this piece of legislation, are really saying that, here are some guys, they're very capable. When you're working with health professionals who don't maybe have any direct lived experience of someone with Down syndrome, and they're, again, working off quite an outdated script, they may not be using the language, or they may not have the expectations that families would have. So one of the things we're hoping that this bill will do is actually just improve awareness, improve empathy, and give people a much better understanding around what Down syndrome is. And again, to be clear to folk at home, who many of them will know exactly how Parliament works, but others perhaps may not, this bill will become an Act of Parliament for that crucial reason that Her Majesty's government have said we will back it. I mean, there's an awful lot of private members' bills that are passed through first reading to make a point, and there's nothing wrong with that, but then they rest on the shelf and gather up. The minute ministers said, yeah, we're with you, Liam, absolutely fundamental. This will be law within probably about a year? Well, no, actually, we're hoping this will become law by the 21st of March 2022. Right. So it's a very so it must become law within this parliamentary session. With Gillian Keegan, I was in the House yesterday when the bill was nodded through, and to see the minister wave to me in the gallery, wave to my family in the gallery, see MPs from across the political spectrum wave to us, give us the thumbs up, big smile, it's extraordinary. The APPG, which was set up just ahead of
Liam taking on this cause.
All-party parliamentary group.
Yeah, sorry, all-party parliamentary group for Down syndrome.
No, I would only butt in because, I mean, that was one of the standout points of Liam Fox's Twitter campaign as well.
That's
he
right.
was standing there with Down syndrome people, but also Labour politicians, Liberal Democrat politicians, SNP politicians.
That's it, yeah. Plaid politicians, Scottish National Party politicians. We've got 7 political parties, SDLP politician, 7 political parties in the APPG for Down syndrome. You've got incredible advocates like Ian Paisley Jr., who is going to make it a personal mission to make sure this gets adopted.
It is quite extraordinary. My warmest congratulations. I mean, the only final question that crosses my mind, given the level of success that you and your wife have had, what are you going to do next?
Well,
you'll have people queuing up to lobby you to be lobbying people on their behalf.
I know, but we have 3 sons. My wife Rachel and I. We have our youngest son Max, who's 17, has Down syndrome.
Yeah,
and just he's been inspirational for me. He's been absolutely changed our life, changed the way we do business, think about business, and think about how everyone fits into society. And coming together with an incredible bunch of people in the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, they're people who, it's not about rearranging the deck chairs. This isn't about making people feel comfortable or have something convenient. This is about creating a policy and creating an expectation in life that people with Down syndrome should be included everywhere. Having someone like Liam Fox on board, all his energy, having the government as well, for the UK, for Great Britain, this is a world first. This is something we hope will be replicated around the world, and the success that we've seen over here and the powerful message that MPs gave out yesterday in the chamber, saying that everyone must give regard to this legislation. There is no government department will be able to say we didn't know that we had to do this. They must give proper regard to people with Down syndrome now. So we are so excited about the future.
You're entitled to be so. It is a phenomenal achievement, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to discuss it with you, Ken. My best wishes to you and your family, and to Max particularly. And go on, hold it up. There it is. We rehearsed this. It's on camera 5. No, keep it there,
Sorry,
Ken.
keep it there. Sorry.
Milk the moment.
Yes. National
and if you, and I'm talking now just to hold it there, if you want to see a little bit more background on it and whether your MP was one of those brilliant men and women who backed it, then go on to Twitter and look at Liam Fox's Twitter account, because it goes on and on and on, not in a boring way, quite the opposite, in an uplifting and reassuring way. So there we are. Warmest congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Tell you what, let's make a mental booking. We'll talk again in the spring, because it's how it unfolds. And as you rightly said about how other government departments react to it, not least Department for Education, and I'm sure Nadine will be on side for that as well. But let's talk again.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. That's Ken Ross there, the founding officer of the Down Syndrome Policy Group. We let it go for quite a while. That's our decision, because it's a good story. Not only a good story about folk who have Down syndrome, but about how ordinary people like him and his missus, on behalf of Max and their other children, can get things done when there are good politicians like Liam Fox around to help them. So let's have a hurrah for the good guys, whilst we still look at the bad guys occasionally and report in detail upon them too. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've plenty more to come this Saturday afternoon. 3-time gymnastic Olympic champion Max Whitlock has been inspiring young people at the University of Hull. We'll find out all about that next, as our Yorkshire reporter has been to meet him. So see you in a couple of minutes.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking very windy and bitterly cold, with Storm Arwen still making its presence felt. Let's take a look at the details. Skies should be brighter across southwest England, but gale-force northerly wind will continue to drive in further showers, especially across Cornwall. Feeling bitterly cold too there. Cloudier skies for London and the southeast, with further outbreaks of rain and sleet possible. Again, it will be windy with highs of just 6 degrees Celsius. Much of Wales will see sunshine, though there will be some coastal showers. Still very windy for many. Pennine areas of northwest England could remain quite cloudy, but further west there'll be some sunshine. Again, it's still windy, though winds will gradually be easing down and feeling bitterly cold for all. Plenty of showers will continue to feed in across northeast England, bringing in a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Strong northerly winds will enhance the bitterly cold feel, with highs not much above freezing. It will at least be a fairly pleasant day across central Scotland, with plenty of sunshine to close out the afternoon. Again, it will be very cold there as well. Finally, to Northern Ireland, where the strong northerly winds will continue to blow in a few showers, some of which could be wintry. Highs in Belfast around 5 Celsius. Winds will continue to slowly ease for most areas, with temperatures then falling sharply under clear skies.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Three-time Olympic champion Max Whitlock, MBE, has been inspiring young people at the University of Hull. The nation's most successful ever gymnast shared his inspirational story and took part in a series of competitive activities with the students. Good luck to them. They challenged to try and beat his score. Yeah. Well, Max is the university's official Team GB ambassador, and our Yorkshire and Humber correspondent Anna Riley recently caught up with him.
Max Whitlock is Britain's most successful gymnast, having won 6 Olympic medals. The Hertfordshire athlete made history at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games when he won Great Britain's first medal in the all-round event for 108 years, before becoming the first British gold medalist in artistic gymnastics with victory in the floor and pommel horse events. The gymnast retained his Olympic title with victory in the men's pommel horse at Tokyo 2020, his 3rd gold medal on sport's greatest stage, an achievement he's certainly proud of.
It feels amazing. I think this build-up, as everyone knows, like the COVID times, everything, everyone faced a lot of different challenges. The Olympics was obviously delayed by a year, so it was kind of, that cycle was really strung out, so we had to delay our preparation try and work in different ways that we've never worked before. So actually, the challenge is to get to this point, to come home with a gold medal. You know, it makes me feel so happy that it went ahead, first and foremost, of course, but just a huge sense of relief. And I feel like it's even more rewarding because it was more challenging to get there, more challenging to be in peak condition by the time Tokyo actually come round. So, yeah, incredible feeling.
Max's third Olympic Games also marked his first as a father, with 2-year-old Willow cheering him on to success from home. But not having his family there to support him was something that Max missed.
You know, my family was all booked to go, and it was hard at times as well because, you know, the rules were changing constantly. So, you know, there was audiences allowed, then there was no one from overseas, then there was like just Japanese spectators, then it was 50% and then it was none. So it was really difficult, and when you walk into an arena, I like to have my point of view where I look up and I know my family are there in the audience watching me. You get kind of a bit of comfort from that. This time was really strange. There was like no one in the audience, it was empty. You're walking out, there's Olympic branding everywhere, Olympic rings. So you know it's the Olympic Games, but it's just quiet. So it was really, really strange, and I think a lot of athletes reacted a bit differently to that. You know, some struggled to get into that zone, but others kind of felt like it was less pressure. So it worked in a lot of different ways, but yeah, it was just a huge shame that I couldn't kind of have my family come out to enjoy the experience as well as supporting me. So, you know, hopefully there's a next time. No, I haven't been back to training yet. So I've, you know, it's not to say I've just been sitting at home. I've been here, there and everywhere, seeing the people that supported me along this journey, going to different places, seeing different people, but also, yeah, spending time with my family. That's for me a huge priority. So having that balance between, you know, work life, training life and being at home and family life, I think is so important. So I try and kind of prioritise, you know, each and every single one in their own ways.
After incredible success in Tokyo this summer, Max made a visit to the University of Hull to engage with students from local schools and colleges, and his time with them was certainly inspiring.
It gave me a really good insight, and it really motivated me to be able to actually think that he's been in all our positions as well, and that we can be in his positions if we put our mind to it.
I found today really good. It's good to see like all the schools coming together, and I do football, my sport, yeah.
It's been quite exciting to meet him in person when you see him and like doing like all the different like Tokyo Olympics and everything. But as well, like comparing his scores to his in like fitness and everything, seeing what that's like compared to an ordinary, so like average teenager as well.
Next year, Max is an ambassador for the World Gymnastic Championships in Liverpool, and he hopes that with COVID restrictions being eased, that 2022 will be a time for everyone to once more celebrate sport together. Anna Riley for GB News.
When he came into ITN, when I was used to be working there, he did it on a handstand. Brilliant. It's exactly 2 o'clock. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. Lots of brilliant conversations and guests still to come. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back. If you've been with us since 12 o'clock or since 1 o'clock or for the last couple of minutes, or hello and welcome if you've just joined us. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next hour I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter across the country. We've plenty more still to come before 3 o'clock. Shortly I'll be sharing your views, and they have been sensational. Thank you very much indeed. I'll also offer you my take on it, which I hope you find interesting and stimulating. All of that on our main discussion today, which has been about defence policy. How safe do you feel, and are the UK's defences up to the challenges? But first, let's bring you right up to date a little after 2 o'clock with all of the news and Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. This is your news just after 2 o'clock. COVID vaccines are being altered amid concerns the new variant, Omicron, could be resistant. Earlier, Germany became the second country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. Pfizer expects it will produce a tailor-made jab in 100 days, while Novavax says they will have a vaccine ready to test in the next few weeks. Overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the variant was first detected. detected. The new strain has also been found in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium.
Once you detect it, it's probably too late to stop it completely from getting into the country, but delaying more people bringing in this variant to compound the current problem we have with Delta virus is something that's really important. We react quickly. We know from previous experience that dithering and delaying in doing things and just paying attention to what virus is coming from where has landed us in trouble in the past. So just being a bit more cautious and preempting a problem is quite important.
2 men have died after being struck by falling trees as Storm Arwen hit the UK with 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. One man was killed in County Antrim yesterday afternoon and a second died in Cumbria last night. More than 100,000 homes have experienced power cuts across the UK. Yellow weather warnings remain in place and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Relations between the UK and France remain strong. That's according to Security Minister Damien Hines. He also defended Boris Johnson's move to tweet a letter to French President Emmanuel Macron detailing how to deal with migrants crossing the Channel. Earlier this week, 27 people drowned in the Channel on Wednesday after a boat capsized. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan says he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azim Rafiq has experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq told MPs he faced institutional racism at Yorkshire. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. Tributes have poured in for the American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim, who's died aged 91. He was best known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and West Side Story. Andrew Lloyd Webber says he was a musical theatre giant. Pharmacists in Scotland are on a knife edge after being overworked. A new survey from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society reveals almost 9 in 10 people working in the sector fear they're at risk of being burnt out, and almost a third are considering quitting. Claire Morrison, the Scotland director for the RPS, called the findings unacceptable. Hundreds of migrants from Central America and Haiti are marching from southern Mexico to the United States border. Around 1,000 people, many carrying children, started walking from a city near Guatemala and are planning to join another group before reaching the border. The festive season is officially underway at Westminster. Parliamentary staff used a crane to unload and decorate their rare 42-feet Christmas tree. The spruce was selected from the 60,000-hectare Kielder Forest in Northumberland. That's the biggest in England. And Royal Mail has announced the regional winners of a competition for young people to design stamps based on heroes of the pandemic. Children aged 4 to 14 designed stamps to celebrate a range of people, including NHS workers, parents and teachers. The Prince of Wales will select the final 8 designs. That's your latest. I'll be back in half an hour.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. I am Alastair Stewart, and for the next hour or 55 minutes or so, I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, in just a moment, you'll be hearing my take on our top story today. As threats build and threats are redefined, how safe do you feel? And are the UK's defences up to the challenge? But before that, I'll be sharing with you what you think about the matter, and a lot of you have been getting in touch. And it hasn't been done for almost 200 years, but now the Royal Horticultural Society has invited fungi back into its gardens. But why was it excluded in the first place, and why bring it back now? I'm genuinely intrigued, and I hope you will be as well. We'll be finding all of the answers from a horticulturalist. Plus, we will be shining a spotlight on an individual who is going above and beyond to make the world a better place in our good causes slot. This week, I'm joined by a woman who looks after the welfare of homeless dogs. Yes, I know, I have a particular soft spot for that, so there you go. It's called Alastair Stewart and Friends. Before we get to your views on the issue and mine, let's take a look back at what some of our distinguished guests had to say about defence. What are we defending and how? First of all, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former NATO commander and former Ministry of Defence Director General, told me if we still need all 3 military services.
the fact of life, the Navy's in really good shape. It has a coherent strategy. It's been thinking about what it needs to be for the future. So in all its arms, particularly the submarine service, the Royal Marines, Fleet Air Arm, Surface Fleet, and the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, they've got a coherent plan for delivering against the Prime Minister's desire to be the leading maritime nation in Europe and to have a significant impact around the world, particularly in the globalized world that is typified by the sea. I always say the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. You can't go anywhere in the world unless you go across or through the sea. Now, in future, I think the Navy will lead the idea that British Armed Forces will be high impact but low footprint, will be very agile. The Air Force, of course, typify that in deploying some of their fighting power, both the unmanned and the manned vehicles. But for the Army, it's going to be a major transformation. Let me tell you, technologically, within the next 10 years, everything and everyone's going to be detectable on the surface of this planet. And for major military powers like Russia, China, United States, ourselves and France, that's going to be a major sort of tactical opportunity, and we'll have the weapons and systems to deal with that. But what that also means is if you're static and you have big formations on the ground, you're really going to be vulnerable to a whole range of ballistic, hypersonic missiles, and also unmanned drones and loitering munitions. So the Army is going to have to get much more agile. It's going to have to be able to be less visible on the ground. So these big mass formations are going to be very vulnerable, and they're going to have to think about how they can be high impact, low footprint, very agile. And that, I think, is going to be the major transformation. The Navy and the Air Force technically are there. They tend to operate that way anyway, but I think the Army is going to have to think about how it does. And to be fair, talking this week, the Army are thinking about that. They are transforming, but they have to get beyond Afghanistan and Iraq and start thinking about the consequences, deterring opponents like China and Russia in combination with our allies, and of course independently where we have to.
Admiral Chris Parry there. We also spoke to former Security Minister and former First Sea Lord, Admiral Lord Alan West. He joined in the conversation and gave me his thoughts on the defence challenges and the defence response.
When it comes to the broader issue of defence spending, it's very hard to persuade them that they need to spend that money because they don't feel immediately threatened. And I think that is actually very worrying now, because certainly I feel we're at a more dangerous time than at any time in my, and I'm still actually a serving admiral, having been a First Sea Lord, but at any time in my 56 years of service, I think we're probably one of the most dangerous times now. In terms of the nuclear clock, I think the nuclear clock that moves up towards midnight because of the behavior of Putin, the extraordinary things he's done with cyber attacks, the anti-satellite missile he's fired, oil supplies coming into Europe, the whole business of threatening Ukraine. He did a WMD attack in Salisbury. Goodness knows what he's doing, but my goodness me, this is dangerous. And he loosely talks about use of nuclear weapons, as does the leader of Belarus. And there's all that incident on the border. This is highly, highly dangerous. I think we're nearer in the nuclear clock to, by miscalculation, a mistake going on than we've ever been. And we need to keep our nuclear weapons for that reason. But what we do need to do is really embark on a major program of trying to get the number of nuclear agreements there were and ties with countries that really don't like us, but so that we could talk to them. We must put huge effort into that. But taking that nuclear stuff aside, there is no doubt China have made it very clear they wish to be the greatest power in the world by 2030. Xi Jinping has said that. And global stability is hugely important to our nation. Again, our public sort of forget this. Our public forget that we run global shipping from London. Global shipping are the sinews of the wealth of our little global village. And we run it from London. And we are the biggest European investor in South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific. All of that is very important for our balance of payments. Now, again, the public aren't aware of that. And I think the fact that we're looking at a global Britain, it's easy to laugh at it, but global stability is very important. And one thing that competent and capable armed forces do, they are good at stopping wars and stabilising. There's no doubt the carrier battle group, for example, going out to the Far East, lots of people said, oh, this is doing this, that, and the other. Actually, it's been immensely successful. The Chinese and the Russians don't like it, my goodness me, and they said lots of silly things, but they know, should it come to a crunch today, at this present time, it might change in the future, we would actually give them a good frapping with that carrier battle group, whether they be Chinese or Russians, and then home for tea and medals. I mean, they know that, and that's why they're so nervous about it.
Yeah.
But we need to show that we're willing to have strong forces. But the British people think, well, hang on, as you very rightly say, I want money spent on my National Health Service. I want to look after Granny and this sort of thing. You can understand it, but they need to be aware of the risks that are there.
Well, you might expect that two admirals would say that in defence of our defence spending, and you might think that you, Joe, and Joanna Public might take a different view. I think not. Let me share with you just some, and we've had a huge number of your emails and your tweets about this subject. And let me start with Kyle, who emails, I am ex-forces. It worries me greatly when I see these reductions to our armed forces. These changes are often disguised as making our forces more agile, more specialised and more able to adapt to threats. It's absolute nonsense. The government clearly don't value the armed forces. We are walking blindly into disaster with the threats from China and Russia. It could mean a Dunkirk 2.0. Why don't they see it? Nick also took to email and writes, as a veteran, having served 30 years in the UK Armed Forces, I believe it is short-sighted to significantly reduce the size of our already relatively small armed forces. Our Navy fleet is a fraction in numbers of what it was, with a shortage of personnel to man the ships. Yes, we have newish aircraft carriers, but they need support vessels. You need numbers and reserves to hold and maintain ground. And to cut numbers to save money and to pay for new technology is not a valid argument in my book, says Nick. Better to save the billions wasted on ill-thought-through equipment that doesn't work. I think he's thinking of Ajax, the noisy tank that means the crews can't drive them because they deafen them. He may not be thinking of that, but I was. I go on with Nick's email. It is no coincidence that the main threats around the world, Russia, China and others, all have large numbers of forces with the latest technologies. Reducing our numbers by 10,000 means we can't operate alone in a major conflict, as Afghanistan proved. Short and sharp from Graham, where defence is concerned, spending should have no upper limit. Defence of the country is paramount. We spend where and when it is needed. Tansy took to Twitter. How safe do people feel? In an age of social media, people feel far less safe. They are, ironically, probably safer now than any period in modern history. And the next war will come precisely from where no one is looking, as per every other war. Jonathan, back to email. The two biggest threats the world faces today are China and Russia. I should just point out that that is a fairly common thread from all of the other people who tweeted or emailed. Jonathan goes on, I personally feel that China is the bigger threat. The UK has been cutting back on defence spending over a number of years, and I don't see a change in the near future. I also do not have confidence in the United States of America being there for us always. I think Alan West made a point not unlike that. I see the UK's role in the future being very different to the last 20 years. I also don't believe the UK can afford a huge spend on defence anymore. I disagree with your guest, Chris, that's Admiral Parry. Russia is already proven to the West that it can knock out satellites and our eyes, as it were, on the battleground. It was important to include that one because, as I say, the vast majority of people were in support of defence spending, but Jonathan intelligently and calmly saying, let's be cautious and let's bear in mind what the nation can afford. But I give the last word to Robert, who emails, we are defending our rights and freedoms. If we don't have those, we have nothing. A simple truth from Robert there that has echoed across the ages. Thank you all very much indeed for those thoughts and for the ones that, alas, I didn't have time for. But now it's time for my take. In the early 1990s, I had a briefing with the then Chief of the Defence Staff before going out to cover the first Gulf War. As the son of an RAF officer who'd actually worked for the Chief of the Defence Staff, he knew that I would want to know about the RAF deployment. But when I asked him which squadrons would be going, he said, and I quote, "It's not like that today. We send the best aircraft and the best air crews wherever they may be. It is a flexible mix." Very radical 30 years ago. But it was a sign of the times to come. We now have fewer soldiers in fewer regiments, but deployed and grouped in units like 77 Brigade that meet the current need. We still have 2 huge aircraft carriers that we discussed so much throughout the last couple of hours. But rather than just platforms for aircraft, they are huge mobile surveillance units. They are statements of intent, floating chunks of sovereignty, as Chris Parry so brilliantly put it. As I say, flag-carrying vessels that can unleash missiles on targets hundreds of miles away. We still have aircraft that can buzz Russian bombers over the North Sea, as my dad used to in the 60s and the 70s, as they snoop on our defences, which they still do. But we can also bomb Syria, photograph the Polish-Belarus border, or drop supplies into starving regions of Africa. And we have tanks that can be withdrawn from Europe, only to be redeployed at short notice when the threat changes. The outgoing Chief of the Defence Staff, General Cynic Carter, talks of the grey zone activity, short of outright invasion and pitched battles, but instead provocative activity, incursions and such like, bolstering a nation's standing and influence. That re-emergence of state-on-state threats, such as those that you've spotted and written about in your emails and messages to me from Russia and China, have replaced Islamist terrorism as the government's main national security priority. That's a truth that in itself is deeply worrying. But the methodology is also profoundly different. The information war's not just the stuff of Hollywood, it is real and is out there right now. So the square-jaw, battle-ready killer gives way to the slightly geeky figure, number-crunching, data pattern probing and seeking what the enemy is really up to in cyberspace, just as much as on the borders and potential battlefields of the world. Lawrence of Arabia was one of the very first groundbreakers to do battle with the brass during the Arab Revolt and the Sinai and Palestine campaigns against the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. He explained that their pitched battle mentality wouldn't necessarily work. Terrorism to take it on, hit and run it, and infiltration everywhere were the way forward. He was never accepted, but he was right. And his writings are still a handbook for those struggling with today's threats from the shadows. Today's military leaders, in my view, have learnt that lesson and are flexible, more alert, more capable of lateral thinking. While many of us still love watching the Red Arrows, the household cavalry, and a destroyer even doing donuts at speed, it is the men and women in bunkers, at computer screens, and bravely taking on groups of terrorists as they go undercover, who really keep us safe. It matters that we fund them properly and learn to respect them just as much as we did the Tommies of the First World War and the few of the Battle of Britain. We should still admire their bravery and commitment as we did the boy who stood on the burning deck. I guess remembrance demonstrates that we still do, and I suspect and I hope that we will continue so to do for some time to come. We've more to come this Saturday on Alastair Stewart and Friends. Indeed, coming up, the Royal Horticultural Society has invited fungi back into its gardens for the first time in almost 200 years. So, why the change of heart? And why was fungi banned to begin with? We'll find out shortly. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
A few blustery showers will continue to affect Cornwall this evening, but elsewhere across the southwest it'll be dry with clear periods, still generally feeling cold, though in the northerly breeze. The southeast of England will be cloudy with a gust of wind, and here a few outbreaks of rain and hill sleet are possible. A few showers will brush in from the north into the western parts of Wales. Elsewhere across the country it will be dry but chilly. A bit of an east to west split is likely across the Midlands. Cloudy and windy weather will affect the east with the odd patch of rain or sleet, whilst further west clearer skies are likely. It remains blustery across the northeast of England heading into the evening, with an ongoing risk of some rain which could fall as sleet or snow in places. Wintry showers will feed into northern Scotland as well, but further south a good deal of dry and fairly clear weather is on the cards. As elsewhere though, a chilly northerly wind will persist. Those winds will be a little lighter across Northern Ireland, and here a mix of clear spells and scattered showers is expected. Temperatures will be falling away under the clearer breaks. Overnight, a widespread frost will form with some ice too, especially in the north and east.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alastair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3 every Saturday and Sunday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
On GB News, and we have some breaking news that we kind of expected, but it's now fallen. 2 cases of the new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, have been detected in the United Kingdom. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says targeted testing will take place in Chelmsford and in Nottingham, where those 2 cases have been found. Now, the UK is actually the 3rd country in Europe to confirm suspected cases of the new variant. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Dr. Andy Peston of the University of Bath to discuss this. There you are. Welcome to you. I know this is very, very short notice. It's breaking news. It is 2 cases. Some people will say, overreaction. Others will say, yeah, told you, right to shut the flights down and what have you. What's your take?
I think many people considered it probably inevitable
if this really is a highly infectious virus, it would land on these shores. But of course, the point of the travel restrictions was to try and buy that time.
Yeah.
We're in that very early period now, so obviously this is where track and trace can actually be highly effective if you have, identified cases with known contacts, and it's been a relatively short period of time since the identification. But of course, it looks as if this variant is far more widely spread than perhaps we thought, even as little time ago as Thursday. So it wouldn't surprise me if we find more cases across Europe and in the UK over the next 7 days or so.
Yeah. And is it your instinct that these are possibly cases of folk who came in from southern Africa before the shutdown of the flights, or possibly from somewhere like Belgium, where we also know that there have been other cases?
It's possible, of course. UK HSA have said the 2 cases are linked, so that would fit with a pattern of maybe a party that have travelled back together and then gone their separate ways on arriving in the UK. But of course, the Belgium case was in somebody who had returned 11 days ago from both Turkey and Egypt. So again, a case that's linked to travel, but not to any of the other previously known hotspots for this variant. Again, all fitting with the picture. This is probably far more widespread than perhaps we realise.
And I mentioned earlier on in the programme, Andy, before this breaking news dropped, that there was a perception of mixed signalling, in the sense that the World Health Organization is clear that this is a cause of grave and serious concern, where Sajid Javid a couple of days ago said, look, it looks tricky, it looks dodgy, we're taking tough decisions right now while we find out how dodgy it actually is. And even Chris Whitty in the papers this morning saying, well, I'm not sure that it's actually as bad as Delta. Those mixed signals beyond the medicine are deeply worrying. These guys really should be getting their act together, shouldn't they?
I think consistent messaging has been key throughout the pandemic, no matter what we're discussing. People need clear, unambiguous advice or guidance. At the moment, it's just such huge uncertainty at the moment. On paper, this is as bad a variant as we perhaps would have dreamed to draw up, at least on paper. But we know that, on paper is very different from the real world situation. So there is circumstantial evidence that this is behaving much as we fear it might in terms of its infectiousness. But of course, the big thing would be, does it evade any of the immunity that's been built up in so many countries now? And for that, while there's, again, some signs in the changes that's happened in the spike protein of this variant, we know it's a far more complex scenario from that. And actually, perhaps there isn't that data coming out of South Africa yet, as in terms of increased virulence, at least. So it is a slightly mixed picture still at the moment. But I agree. If you want people to behave in a certain way, and I think we'll now move on to a new sort of tranche of caution now that it's on our shores. Obviously, there was a lot of talk of vigilance and maintaining alertness and good measures. That's when it was as far away as South Africa. Now it's actually in the country. I think we'll see that sort of requirement or asking for using all measures available to us, perhaps although short of Plan B. I think the government's very reluctant to go to those measures at this particular stage. I think that message now needs to be unambiguous and very, very clear.
Sure. I mean, we have celebratedly different views on vaccination here at GB News, and we have very open and frank discussions amongst colleagues about it. But I'm keenly aware that this will invigorate both sides of the argument, in the sense those who are opposed to vaccination because they don't think it's been well researched and they don't think it's completely safe will say, there you see, it doesn't work. The other side of the argument will say, there you see, if we'd got 100% rather than 85, 90%, this might not have happened. What is your objective medical view?
Vaccinations have greatly improved the situation that we find ourselves. I think without vaccination, we would not be have unlocked way back on July the 19th. No vaccine's ever really going to be 100%. I think, I'd like to think that perhaps those of us in the field have been open about that. But I think the evidence is overwhelming that it's actually reduced the severity of COVID for many, many people, even if it's not completely blocked them. And even with this new variant, I'd be hugely surprised if the vaccine went from high levels of protection against severe disease to zero. It might take a hit. But again, with the booster program that's ongoing at the moment, it's quite clear, at least with Delta, that boosting, raises those antibody levels so high that even against a mismatched vaccine, it still gives you the level of protection that we would like. So keeping people out of hospital, stopping a large number of people from dying. Those levels might come down a little bit, but I'd be hugely surprised if the situation didn't remain that you are far better protected once vaccinated and boosted than if you were not.
My view as well, as it happens, but as I said, and thank you for engaging with it, other views are available, but you and I happen to think they're wrong, but that doesn't preclude people from having the right to express them. Andy, let me underline and stress, thank you very much for your sage and calm guidance and urging people not to overreact, but to continue to be sensible. And thank you very much indeed for joining us on GB News at what was very short notice. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Love to have the voice of authority there, and that was indeed Dr. Andrew Preston, microbiologist at the University of Bath. Now, we had an intriguing conversation a little earlier on with Jim Dale about Storm Arwen, which has been wreaking havoc across the country. And a lot of you have now moved on from defence, which was brilliant in all of your emails there, and are beginning to inundate us with your thoughts on the wild weather. I didn't even ask for it, but it's very, very welcome. And first of all, huge thanks to Yvonne, who has sent in her picture. Do we have there? It's rather beautiful, we thought, with just that lovely rolling Derbyshire landscape there, with just the lovely little hedgerow in the middle. So thank you very much indeed for that. We also have Paul's Winter Wonderland, and there it is in Sheffield. Winter Wonderland, unless you happen to be the owner of one of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars, do be frightfully careful when you drive off in them. There's snow apparently in neighbouring Leeds too, says Diane. So thank you very much indeed. And Adam has sent a video of the power outage. I hate that word, but there we go. Power cut caused by Storm Arwen. Do we have that video clip? There it is. Look. Oh, blimey. Thunder and lightning. Very, very frightening. Where is that? Remind me, folks, in my ear. Where did Adam send the video from? Oh, Adam didn't tell us where it is. Well, never mind. But if Adam would like to let us know, I shall read that out. But it's a great picture because it's just the calm nightscape, as it were, but with those amazing flashes. So thanks ever so much for that. And do keep them coming in. We're still on air for another 27 minutes or so. And if they're really good, we shall break into whatever else we're up to share them back. But whatever you're doing, take care. Look after yourself. Like those pictures of cars stuck in the snow. Do be careful when you get out and about. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've still lots more to come this afternoon, including our Good Causes segment, and it is a story you will not want to miss. This week I'm joined by a woman who looks after homeless dogs. Yeah, I love it, and I know you do too. But first of all, let's bring you right up to date with the very latest and some of it breaking news headlines.
Thanks, Alistair. These are your latest headlines. As you've been hearing, 2 cases of the new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, have been detected in the UK. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says targeted testing will happen in Chelmsford and in Nottingham, where the cases were found. The UK is the 3rd country in Europe to confirm their first suspected case. That follows Germany and Belgium. Overnight, the US joined a growing list of countries imposing restrictions on travel from South Africa, where the variant was first detected. There are also cases in Hong Kong, Israel and Belgium. 2 men have been killed by falling trees as Storm Arwen brought 100-mile-an-hour winds overnight. 1 man died in County Antrim yesterday afternoon, while a second died in Cumbria last night. Yellow weather warnings remain in place across the country, and the Met Office are advising people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan says he's sorry for the hurt his former teammate Azeem Rafiq experienced. Earlier this month, Rafiq told MPs he faced institutional racism at Yorkshire. Vaughan was among a number of figures implicated in the case, but he denies the claims. And tributes have poured in for the American composer and songwriter Stephen Sondheim, who's died aged 91. He was best known for musicals including Sweeney Todd and West Side Story, and Andrew Lloyd Webber says he was a musical theatre giant. I'll be back with a full update in the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. We're on the last lap. This is something that's not been done for almost 200 years, so we thought it was well worth covering. The Royal Horticultural Society is going to grow and propagate fungi in its gardens. Now, many gardeners might consider mushrooms et al. A menace, but fungi are actually said to have many benefits. I am delighted to be joined now by Michael Parry to tell us more, the great horticulturalist. Michael, what are the benefits of fungi?
Oh, gosh, there are so many benefits. First of all, there are a lot of plants that rely on fungi because they have symbiotic relationships, especially wild plants. They can't get a lot of goodness from the soil themselves without fungi lending that helping hand. Obviously, cultivated plants and crops that we grow, they're so used to being fertilized. So, of course, they're not relying on the fungi, but there's various kind of fungi sold as pellets to home gardeners, which is a new way of fertilizing and kind of helping your plants to access that goodness in the soil. But, you know, aside from that, you're talking about saprophytic fungi here, which are the ones that help to decay matter, and they work in communities in order to break down, you know, foliage, leaves, decaying matter. And if we didn't have that, we'd kind of be knee deep in branches and leaves, etc. So kind of we rely on fungi for so many different things. And of course, medicines, food, adaptogenics.
I have a little tree stump. I mean, literally, it's about the size of a soup plate, and because I don't want to dig up the garden to get the roots out, and it sits there. Yeah. And it is a magnet for fungi. Beautiful little bits of beauty, which I just love photographing and looking at. So, but are you saying in future, once it's run its day and it's brown and squidgy, I should then gather it up and put it on the rose garden?
Yeah, well, that fungi is actually going to help to break that down, you know, even if it is just left in situ. But remember, fungi are everywhere that we can't see as well. There's networks below the soil surface that actually link about 90% of the land-based plants, because not only are they helping to have those symbiotic relationships, but they're also helping the plants to communicate as well, and the trees as well to, you know, warn of pests, disease that could be nearby. So kind of as much as possible, we should try and not break up those relationships. It's really an essential part of the ecosystem, but until now, been so overlooked. And we kind of, you know, we walk along, we see a mushroom, and kind of, I think traditionally we'd see that as a bit dirty. You know, if you've got fungi growing in your garden, that feels like it's unclean or something, but it's completely natural. And that is why it's great. The RHS is moving towards this and actually intentionally creating populations of fungus there. I love it.
Keen observer of these matters, not only in the present, but the history of it as well. So do you know why the RHS banned them and tried to do them down 200 years ago?
I don't know precisely, but I wonder if it was sort of kind of like attitudes towards them and how we used to approach fungi. But now there's so much more research. And like we said, you know, we appreciate they're used in lots of different foods. We're moving to plant-based diets, so we're more interested in plants, fungi. Also, a lot of that medicinal use, but also adaptogenics, you know, helping relieving the body of stress, all of that research. And of course, on Netflix, I believe, there's a new program, Fantastic Fungi, which is kind of letting people know how important they are. And now we're realizing that plants use them to communicate. They're such an important part of the food chain and those, you know, communities there. So I think it's probably just a change in awareness, really, that we're kind of really appreciating fungus. And of course, you know, they're popular online as well, which again, you know, we might think that social media and Instagram is frivolous, but of course there's so many mycologists on there sharing their love of fungi, which is then, you know, prompted the RHS into action and kind of appreciating them again, I would say.
And as we covered not that long ago, research work done in the United States of America showing that magic mushrooms are not only the best possible way to listen to Pink Floyd, but have proven medicinal benefits. I was giving away your age there. Medicinal benefits as well. Is the pharma industry really plugged into fungi nowadays?
I'm not too sure commercially, but I know certainly at a garden level, you know, there are various products out there with mycorrhizal fungi in, which are helping to kind of build that network and to help everyday garden plants to not fertilize them with something synthetic, but to actually encourage the fungi to bring those sugars to the plants and for the fungi to access more nutrients that are in the soil. So the more that we use those type of feeds, you know, hopefully that will have a knock-on effect because it's much more natural. And of course, so many plants do rely on fungi. And of course, you have to remember plants, they're right at the end of the food chain. So we rely on those. So actually, you know, fundamentally, we rely on fungi. So they're so important, even though they're so overlooked.
Finally, I've just had a little whisper in my ears from my producer saying, you did hear him just say that plants communicate with each other. And I'm kind of, because I mean, I did know that because I've read it elsewhere, but I think the feeling is that a number of folk perhaps listening to our conversation don't get that. Now, we're not talking about a tree having a chat with a rose bush, but there is genuine communication between these magnificent plants. Explain that.
Yeah, well, if you imagine kind of the structure of the fungi, you know, this is called mycelium, which is almost like a strand kind of root network that goes below the soil. And that actually links up the roots of many different plants. It's almost an extension of the roots of plants and trees. And particularly with trees, they will communicate with each other through this network. And if there is an outbreak of pest or disease, then they can let the other trees know. This could be through the air. It could be there's certain pheromones that are let off when the pests are kind of in presence, or it could be to help seedlings. You know, seedlings from the larger trees and offspring, which are then helped by having this mycelium network below the ground, which is then helping those roots and those networks to access extra nutrients that are in the soil and almost that extension of the root system. And where possible, those symbiotic relationships where, you know, there's various orchids. There's Orchis italica, which grows naturally in the Mediterranean. And this relies on only one type of fungus to grow successfully. So some of these plants you can't grow in cultivation because you wouldn't have that fungus that it has that symbiotic relationship with. So yeah, it's a fascinating world, and I'm really pleased that it's becoming more kind of seen, really. And the RHS is a great flagship for that, and I can't wait to see the garden that they're going to create.
I totally agree with you. A joy to behold. Always a genuine pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. I love our conversations. And I'll see you again very, very soon, I hope. That's the lovely Michael Parry, horticulturalist, but always brings alive so many of those things that I love, and I'm sure you do as well. Just the plant life that's out there. So next time you walk past an oak tree and you see a tiny little mushroom on the floor, please don't interrupt, because they're probably having a chat, and what they're saying will matter to to them. We are just coming up towards the end of the programme, and I am delighted to be ending in my favourite way, our Good Causes segment, where we shine a spotlight on an individual, or sometimes a group of individuals, who've gone above and beyond to make the world, quite simply, a better place. My next guest founded a not-for-profit organisation that looks after the welfare of homeless dogs, as well as looking after their owners, and that bit really matters. I've met her before, and I'm delighted to welcome her back now, the founder of Dogs on the Street, Michelle Clark. Watcha. We'll talk a little bit about the human dimension of it as well, because we have chatted before, I think on one of the other programmes that I do rather than on this one. So I'm delighted that you're able to join us at the weekend. Before coming in detail to what you do... No, let's do it that way first, because it makes more sense than talking about the little local difficulty in London.
Okay.
So I kind of explained there, but Dogs on the Street... What does that mean? Ones that go missing, to a runner, or thrown out by their owners, or any?
OK, so Dogs on the Street's primarily founded looking after rough sleepers who have pet dogs.
Ah, right, yeah.
So we're a charity that supports a community of rough sleepers, not only just in London, but all around the UK, who have pet dogs. We're a registered RCVS vet practice, so we provide free veterinary care from our custom-made mobile vet vehicle. But also, we take dogs into our foster care at our sanctuary to enable rough sleepers to get off the pavement, into temporary accommodation, into rehabilitation, or a pathway forward that we can then bring the dog and the owner back together. But since starting with just rough sleepers, we've expanded now. We support mental health, addiction, domestic violence. We support London Ambulance Service, the police, the hospitals. Anyone in need of help with their dog, whether it's veterinary care, housing or fostering, we're a charity that provides that for them.
And very often, I mean, you know, because we chatted about this before, I'm involved in Crisis, the homeless charity, which is a terrific organisation. There are others as well, like Shelter, and they all do a good job as well. But having a dog for genuinely homeless people is very often their only friend.
Oh, it's their family, it's their life. It gives them life. You know, it gives the people a reason. You know, we get told many a time, if I didn't have my dog, I doubt very much I'd be here. And if we think about it, that it's their dog that is sometimes causing the issue to be on the street because of the barrier with housing, that, you know, a vast percentage of our homeless community is men, and they've normally come out of marriage or relationship breakdowns, and all they have is their dog, which then is forced onto the street because there is such a huge barrier with housing councils, private landlords, that will accept dogs. However, we step in and we support councils and housing, and we're supporting a new UK-wide hostel group to now open their doors to accept more homeless people in with their dogs. An existing hostel group? Yes.
So you're basically negotiating with them because...
We've just entered a partnership with them, and we're now training all their staff.
Yeah.
And obviously, because, you know, we have all the support there for the human, but then when it comes to the dog, it's, you know, there's a lot more entailed because there is an Animal Welfare Act, and, you know, we have a duty of care to look after these dogs whilst the human gets support too. So that's where we step in.
And when you moved on from essentially homeless people who have dogs, and you said mental health people, other social challenges and what have you, was that you, because you're a nice person, thinking we can maybe expand, or was it kind of demand-led? You just bumped up against more and more people who had those kind of difficulties?
Yeah, I think what it is when we first started with the rough sleepers, I mean, they do go through their mental health challenges and obviously their addiction challenges. So, you know, especially since COVID, you know, a lot more have said, you know, a lot more people other than rough sleepers are suffering with mental health and addiction.
Well, we know that as well from the missing charity, Missing Persons.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not always youngsters who've been kidnapped or something ghastly like that. It can be a middle-aged man or woman who just says, enough's enough, I'm off.
Exactly. So, this is where now we've partnered with 4 major London hospitals, including a mental health hospital. so that, again, people that are, say, sectioned immediately and have a dog, or they're taken into hospital. See, what it is a lot, unfortunately, a lot of the barrier is surrender your dog. And we don't believe anybody should have to surrender their dog. So by the dog coming into our sanctuary, we're able to give that dog a bit of respite as well. And also the owner, knowing that their dog is safe and looked after, enables them to get themselves sorted out and supported as well.
Why did you bring a defibrillator with you?
Well, I mean, I was thinking of bringing a dog.
I should explain, during the break, I went out to stretch my legs, as they say, because she was sitting out there on the sofa, and I said, what's that? And she explained. So, why a defibrillator?
OK, so today, I didn't bring a dog with me today, unfortunately. I bought our defibrillator because we also are one of the only outreach charities that is London Ambulance Service accredited, who kindly donated a defibrillator for us to step in and support in saving lives. And obviously, being around a lot of our rough sleeping and homeless community, they are more at high risk, as well as anyone else that may need help. But sadly, since the new ULEZ charge has come in, we are struggling now as a charity because our 2 vehicles, which is a mobile, custom-made vet vehicle providing, vital life-saving at times veterinary care, and also our transporter. So if, for instance, London Ambulance Service call us, the hospitals, the hostels, the police, we can safely transport the dogs around.
Let me interrupt there, because I said at the very beginning we'd talk about it. This is the ultra-low emission zone that the mayor brought in. Everybody has to pay. It's a jolly good cause because it's to try and reduce pollution and all the rest of it. We talked about it on the programme a month and a half ago. You were pitching up. Transport for London and the Mayor's office got in touch. You said, look, we're doing this good stuff. We're working, and I didn't know, you've just told me, working with the London Ambulance Service, working with London hospitals, mental health services and so on and so forth, and you felt you had a compelling case. I thought you had a compelling case, but they have said no.
Yeah, they've said no to us. Yes, so basically the 2 vehicles we've got, they will not overturn the decision, and these 2 vehicles are vital for us to run our charity. But equally, we don't get no government funding. We don't get no, major funding. We solely, rely on our wonderful supporters. So now we're having to put a cost of a life against the cost of travelling. And I just think that we may not come under an emergency service, but we are classed as a vital service.
Well, you've had a phenomenal response as well on social media about it. We had a lovely conversation earlier on about Down syndrome and how important social media can be these days when it's in a good cause. And 1 or 2 people have said to you crowdfunding, because if you got a more environmentally friendly vehicle to do the work, you'd be okay, is that right?
Yeah, but equally, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the vehicles we've got. I know it doesn't come into the ULEZ, but when we actually got these vehicles a few years ago, we was not aware or was not in the knowledge of this ULEZ. Otherwise, we may have looked at it slightly different. But
well, I don't think it existed in those days, did it? It was relatively
about
new
2017 it was.
Oh, right, okay,
It didn't exist. I think it was probably what I'm hearing now just at the start. But I think as well, I mean, scrappage as well, that's bad for the environment as well, if we're going to really look into it in deepness. But it's 2 vehicles, 2 vehicles that are potentially saving lives of both people and dogs.
My point being brutal, though we are chums, and it's called Alastair Stewart and Friends, and I'm totally sympathetic with you. We both know that Sadiq Khan's not going to change his mind.
Well, we're not giving up yet.
Aha!
So, we're not giving up. And the thing is, if it gets to that point, it will be a question of we're going to have to take our services, our support and our defibrillator off the streets.
Yeah. And in that sense, what was new to me, the main standout things that were new to me in this conversation were the relationship with the London Ambulance Service and the London Hospital. Has your campaign in that sense shifted slightly? Because you can have thousands of people on social media being, oh, lovely, we love what Michelle's doing, it's all great, and Dogs on the Street is marvellous. But when big organisations like that are on your side, might things shift?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. you know, obviously the power is in the powers to be, but I mean, it's not like we're asking for a fleet of vehicles. We're asking for 2 vehicles that would cost in the excess of £60,000 to replace. But what is so heart-rending is that we're raising funds to pay for TfL. So we're operating to pay TfL. So, yeah.
I know when you haven't given up. And you haven't given up.
We won't.
You keep in touch with us. It's been lovely seeing you again. The lovely Michelle Clark there, founder of Dogs on the Streets, and goodness me. Hey, there's a fighter right there filling your screen. That's it from me, however. And what a pleasure the last 3 hours have been. I've thoroughly enjoyed your company and hearing from you today. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, 12 till 3. Till then, a very good afternoon to you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
A few blustery showers will continue to affect Cornwall this evening, but elsewhere across the southwest it'll be dry with clear periods. Still generally feeling cold, though, in the northerly breeze. The southeast of England will be cloudy with a gust of wind, and here a few outbreaks of rain and hill sleet are possible. A few showers will brush in from the north into the western parts of Wales. Elsewhere across the country, it will be dry but chilly.